Thank you, Chris. You're a lovely guy. And let's see what's going on here.
Looks good.
It does look good. And let's see what's going on Facebook. People seem to be there. I'm getting a grayed out thing on Facebook. Facebook is just doing something very strange. Okay. Give us just a moment. I am relentless. And have we got fire? Gosh darn it. Andrew, are you seeing Facebook? Oh, wait. No. There we go. Okay. I got a
I saw
thumbs up.
Facebook.
Okay. All right. Okay. No more start and stop action. Looks good. Thank you. All right. Relentless. Stoked. So here's the deal. Taking my glasses off. Gosh darn it. We're in it to win it. Thanks for the feedback. Chris Stark, you're a gem. So here's the deal. 3 things. Great content. If possible, great sound. If possible, great video. Great content always wins. If your content rocks, people are going to love you. Look, there's always going to be something. Technology is not your friend. But it's been like that, right? I mean, think about the number of times you broke a string in the first song, you showed up at the gig, you forgot your Allen wrench. Do you remember when there were the Kaylors and the Floyd Roses and maybe you had both and you brought the wrong Allen wrench to the gig? I mean, there's just always something that's in the way. So what do? We try and prepare. I got a second camera I can go to. Fine. It's like at this point, I've had stuff go wrong. The show must go on. And so here's the deal. What we want to do is talk about the key things you want to keep in mind. So here's the deal. Whether you're shooting video and pushing it or whether you're streaming it, the majority of us are talent, videographer, audio engineer, lighting director, video editor, broadcast audio engineer, and production manager pushing the stuff out to wherever it's going to end up. That's a lot of stuff to do, especially if you're doing it live streaming. So pre-productions is a huge thing to do. Yes, there's going to be stuff that happens when you go live. It's just going to happen. It just goes like that. So ideally what you do is Andrew and I frequently will get on a couple hours in advance before the show starts, and we'll do some test streams. And every so often there's a handshake that doesn't want to happen. Generally speaking, we'll dig into this a little bit later, but I've been using RTMPs. Gosh darn it. I silenced my notifications, but no. Okay, so here's the deal. We're going to talk through some of the things that I'm doing, have been doing. As we said before, we were so rudely interrupted. In 2005, I put out Diatonic Theory and Harmony. I had a videographer. They took care of all the video. I was a talent. They took care of the lights. I was responsible for doing all the mixing in Pro Tools. Things haven't changed that much, except for the fact that now instead of a DVD, we're either streaming or we're putting it up on YouTube or Facebook. So the point being is that what are the things that we need to know to do this? So basically, everybody that's watching, or everybody that will be coming into the stream, or everybody will be watching it at some point is going to be in one of these areas where they're kind of like, I just need to get stuck out of this little place. So one of the things I want to do is talk through a list of a couple of things that are really important per this conversation. All right, so first off, you've got to keep in mind that where you're shooting is a set. That set, based on the size, is going to require a certain amount of light. Based on the size, it's going to require a certain amount of acoustic treatment. Based on the size, you're going to have X amount of volume that you can play up to. So the technology around creating a well-lit set, the bigger the set, the more light you need. The bigger the room, the more you have to treat it. And the smaller the space, the quieter you potentially have to be because of the people around you. So what we want to do is talk about some best practices. Very specifically, from kind of top to bottom. I'm just going to talk through a number of the things that I use and very briefly talk about why I use them. Andrew, I'm going to go full frame for a second here. I hope you don't mind.
Go for it.
Okay, let's do that. Let's see.
I'd love it if you did.
All right, thank you so much. I will go full frame right about now. I'm going to pin myself. There we go. Okay, so here's the deal. This space here is pretty big. And actually, it's kind of dumb luck. That light right there, I'm a big fan of soft boxes with fluorescent lights as opposed to LED panels. The thing about LED panels and light is everything. If you sit there and you look at a camera and the LED panels have to illuminate a fairly large space, they're blinding. And after a while, it's just fatiguing and you lose your focus. One of the things you can do with panels is you can point them towards the ceiling. If you've got a small enough space, that works. But generally, with a reasonably sized space, the LED panels are going to blind you. The neat thing about the fluorescent softbox is the strongest thing I would suggest. I like the 5-bulb ones with the ability to turn each of the bulbs on and off individually with a switch. That way, there's a little bit of directionality with the light, and you can control which bulbs are on and off. That is huge. You're able to fine-tune the light for what you're doing. I'm not traditionally a big fan of classic 3-point lighting, but ironically what I do in the space is I've got 2 big soft boxes, and I actually have some fluorescent lights that are actually on the ceiling that I actually blend in for just a little bit of 3-point lighting. There you have it. Acoustic treatment. You can actually see above me right there. There's acoustic treatment on the ceiling. There's acoustic treatment on the walls. Treating your environment is very important so you can control the sound. One of the things we'll talk about a little bit further into this is how to actually deal with some of the stuff in post. My buddy, one of the questions that we had was about noise, and so the deal is that if as Richard pointed out, you've got noise. How do you fix it in real time? I hate to say it. You eliminate it before it happens. Noise gates, different types of things, but generally running plugins in real time to eliminate noise is a recipe for other things happening. We're going to come back to that, and we're going to dig deeper into that. So the deal is that I shoot in 4K. 90% of the world will never see the difference between 4K and 1080p. Shooting 1080p, it's nice to shoot in 4K. It takes way longer to edit. It takes way longer to pull it down off of a card. It fills your hard drives and your virtual hard drives. I do it because I'm at a point where I'm like, it's a 4K world for me, but honestly, you don't have to. We're going to talk about kind of the various levels of kind of production, first of which it starts here. And one of the neat things about this device is that it actually shoots 4K video. That is a great place to actually incorporate that, but we're going to come back to that a little bit later. Once I shoot in 4K, I am a Premiere shop, but for a couple of reasons. And there's the Final Cut people and the Premiere people, and then there are a bunch of other applications. My buddy Russ had mentioned an application that he's using. We're going to, again, go deeper on all of these things, but I want to give a quick overview about what I'm using and why. The reason I use Premiere is it's part of a round-trip process between Premiere, Photoshop, an application that they don't officially support anymore, but I use all the time called Fireworks, and then also After Effects. And those Adobe products work really well together. They're not cheap, but on a monthly subscription, you're able to do all these different things, and the workflow works really well. I take all my audio and bring it into Pro Tools. Most video people treat their audio inside their nonlinear editor, NLE, as in DAW, Digital Audio Workstation, NLE, nonlinear editor. Just about everybody I know that's serious about video, that's a musician, takes their audio out, treats it in Pro Tools or whatever it is that they're using, and brings it back in. Very briefly, the application that I use to treat my audio in video is a universal audio plugin, and I set that such that it never gets any louder than -4 dB. And what that means is that there's nothing that's going to cause digital distortion down the line. Hugely important. I try not to overcompress video, but what I definitely do is I limit it so it never gets any louder than -4 dB. Moving on. Once I go to put it out either as process video onto YouTube, or I go to to stream, I'm conscious of the fact that I need to have relative continuity between the audio and the video being in sync. It's one of the reasons that I'm jumping over from now kind of production world for YouTube and pushing something from YouTube up onto Facebook over to the streaming side of it. Is one of the first things that I noticed when I just started natively using the software inside Facebook is the audio and the video, they wouldn't sync up. So very quickly, I kind of went, okay, I need to find some other sort of solution. I use a range of things that most of the time handshake pretty well. One is I have moved over to an application that's called Ecamm Live that has a range of things that kind of allow me to do some of the cool things like to my, where is it? No, you're up there. There we go. Allow me to add some branding, some interface stuff. I'll be doing a lot more fun stuff inside this application. It also has this data exchange between Zoom where I can actually kind of bring in my presentation into Zoom. And so people that I'm potentially interviewing or having as guests can see what I'm doing inside there. That's hugely important. Say if I want to do some sort of slideshow or we're talking about some piece of gear and I'm going through, for example, the front panel or the back panel, because a lot of us want to demo gear. The ability for anybody that you've got that's kind of there hanging out with you to see what you're doing is really important. Those are the main pieces for right now. What I want to do is I want to, first of all, take a look and see if there are any questions that have popped up already in the feed. YouTube is great now. Thank you, Nandini. You are a gem. Mike Freed, hello. Okay, so Andrew Bonica, there we go. My face on that is great. Okay. So, first of all, there we go. Come on, playback. There we go. Now, one of the things that it likes to do is it likes to, as soon as I get into this mode, it likes to start playing back the audio. So I'm gonna silence that. All right. First of all, hello. Brian Emilian, welcome, my friend. Good to see you. Long time. Mark Swanson, hello. Eric Klein, hello, my friend. Okay, so I have a bunch of questions that came through from before. Hello to everybody that's on the feed. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a rocket ride. So let me jump over here back to where the questions were. And let's just jump in with a couple of questions. I'm going to bring Andrew into the mix here. And I'm going to unpin my video. And we're going to have a little gallery view. And now you're going to see both of us. And
Hey.
Andrew, first of all, how are you tonight?
I'm doing excellent.
Awesome. So, Andrew, if you get a chance and can
Yes,
navigate over to some of these questions here, just so you can see them coming up that were on the original post from earlier in today. We've got some really, really great questions here that people asked about. And
all right.
So I am excited to just kind of jump right in. I think I'm going to start up with video editing. So first of all, what I would love it if people would do is in the chat, put what it is that you're most excited to learn about and or if that is your Achilles heel. So give us some detail. And in turn, if you've got some specific questions or just dish, let us know. Because tonight is all about, I'm looking at my A camera, which is not my A camera. Tonight is all about you. And we will do everything humanly possible to just kind of go, if we can answer it, we're going to answer it. We also have Jeff Slingluff from Roland who's going to pop in a little bit later, and he's going to be able to answer some of the crazy geeky stuff that I'm sure we're going to get into. But first of all, the nonlinear editor thing. So this is the deal. Editing video is really just like working in a DAW. And instead of just having continuous tracks that you edit, you've got continuous tracks of video and audio. and you just basically cut them and move them around, just like you would take sections of a song and move them around. Sorry, it's not really any more complicated than that. Andrew?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
I'm
No? Maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's pretty much the same concept, right? You've got a timeline, you've
Yep.
got takes, or in this case, clips, right? And you
Yep.
are like we would arrange music, you're arranging shots to tell a story. So you just have the added component of many other, factors like beyond audio. Of course, you've got the colorization and what the framing of the shot, the composition. If especially when you start doing multiple takes, now you've got to sync audio and video. You may have a better audio take from a certain microphone source, or even a re-recording afterwards. As we would call in the post world ADR. Um, and Yeah, it's definitely just more layers of the same stuff, but the general concept is the same. I'm just aggregating the questions here so it's easy
That's great.
to
That's great.
go through.
Okay,
So
I appreciate that.
don't mind me if I'm looking off screen.
Okay, no, that's great. So I'm gonna go back full screen for a second. While you go ahead and aggregate, my friend, and I'm going to pin myself. So here's the deal. I made a couple of notes as I was preparing for tonight, and the interesting thing is that when you get to the editing stage of your video, you find everything you did wrong. So what are some of the classic things that you go, oh, what did I do? All right, if you're totally anal retentive, every time the tripod moves just a little bit, you're going to go nuts. So really kind of maybe mark with some red tape or some colored tape anywhere that you've got something like a tripod set up so you can leave that stationary and not hit it. The other thing that sometimes if you have to strike a set, tape the ground just like you would a stage, right? We already know how to do this. Light. This is one of the challenges. My buddy Chris Stark, I'm going to call out Chris, but only because I love him so much and he's such a great guy. He's got this great setup that for much of the day, he's got amazing natural light because I think he's got this giant bay window in his studio area, which is phenomenal until sunset. And then his natural light source fades. So the obvious solution in there for him is the low-hanging fruit is just like shoot all your video during the day. You've got this great, pretty darn consistent light, with the exception of the fact that Hawaii, like the storm comes in mid-afternoon, range for a while, then it goes out. So that will affect your light. So if you're really anal retentive about light, shoot when you have predictable type of light source. So for Chris, the thing is as I understand, his room is not super, super deep. Again, one of the conversations that kind of we're collectively having together is like, well, how do I light my room? So here's the thing is that in theory, you would say if it's, it's a longer, I should say wider space, it's not necessarily as deep, one would immediately think those LED panels. The problem with the LED panels is that they're excruciatingly bright to look into. And classically, whether you're playing a presentation for somebody, a song, you're going to look up at the camera, especially if you're talking to people, those LEDs are going to be blinding. And I've got a second room upstairs here that I made that's a second video studio. So if I've got some production going on down here, I can have a second production going on up there without having to move stuff around. And again, have stuff move as I go from one scene to the other. I like to have that continuity. So again, in post is when you kind of begin to go, oh, that didn't match up. Couple of little tricks. One of the great things about post is you can always zoom in a little bit. And when you zoom in, you can do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. One of my other favorite tricks is I like to shoot with an A cam and a B cam. And one of the things that you'll see if you watch any of the YouTube stuff that I do that's non-streaming, I'll use my down the next shot when I'm playing. And every time I jump to the first playing shot, I always cut to that. So what it means is that I can be saying, hey, now I'm going to do this. Cuts to that shot, and was shot at a completely different time. Had nothing to do with the continuous moment of me going, now I'm going to play this. And I play it. Never happens. Always shot in two separate things. Because I learned a long time ago from the guy that I started shooting with after Diatonic Theory and Harmonies, like, look, just make it easy. Do all your talking when you're nice and relaxed. Yeah, da da, da da da, da da da. So there's continuity in the talking segments. Two, continuity in the playing segments. Wait until you're nice in the groove. Again, when we go out on stage, we don't kind of go, hey, blah, 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 and then we kind of go out and meander, have a cocktail, hang out, and then jump back on stage and play another song. We come to rock the house. So that continuity of being in that moment is a really, really important thing. And the funny thing is that besides being told, to kind of batch shoot stuff like that, nobody ever actually told me that the creative side of it is like, hey, get into your creative vibe. Now, for me, again, this time of day thing becomes really important. I seem to play my best at two different times a day. For video, I'm the loosest and the most accurate in the morning. But when it comes to live streaming and just kind of like shredding for an hour, later at night. Just saying. Know your creative self, okay? As a matter of fact, as long as I'm on that subject, and I'm not going to go too much deeper on this, we are guitar players, which means we have a tendency to be deep feelers, which means a lot of our motivation has a tendency to be based on what we're feeling in the moment. I study with a team of people, the YouTube stuff, and it's Sean Cannell and his amazing team at Think Media. And Heather Torres is kind of the two I see second in command there. And one of the things she talks about is calendar blocking. I'm working towards that, but the digital distraction of email and different things gets in the way of that. But if you can calendar block and go, all right, I'm going to do this particular activity, this particular day at this particular time, kind of like shuffling cards, you can have a predictable outcome, or at least know what your rhythm is as you work towards a predictable outcome. All right, so the nonlinear editing thing did open the door to like, hey, having your lighting be predictable, or if you're not into doing that, so be it. But know that when you go to bring in something in and start editing, you're going to notice dark, light, and be aware that if that does bother you, it's a matter of planning. One of the other things I have a tendency to do, I buy shirts in pairs. As a quick aside, before we jump into another question here, and again, I realize this was a nonlinear editing question, but the point being is that honestly, it's just like working in your DAW, except instead of just having continuous audio, you got audio and video, and you just cut it. The quality of your video is much like the quality of your audio. If you got a great source and you mic it well and it's not moving around, you end up with a pretty predictable result. The moving around that happens on the video side is light shifting as the sun shifts and your set shifting. So decide how much of that you can and can't tolerate, and that's going to have a huge impact on what you capture on video. I know somebody's thinking, well, what about cameras? There's an amazing 4K camera inside this thing that as we get into the gear side of this, we're going to talk a little bit more about. So with that said, I'm going to jump back over to Andrew Bonica and bring him back into the room, and I'm going to unpin myself. So
Hey,
Andrew,
hey.
we're the monkeys or something like that. So I actually don't know this. What is your nonlinear editor? What do you use? You use Premiere?
Currently, I'm using Final Cut Pro for the projects that I've been doing recently, just because I'm kind of getting back into video editing. I used Premiere a long time ago, and I have it. I do have access to it. By the way, just a heads up, since you mentioned a note about the cost of all the Adobe suite, I just wanted to point out for anybody that's a student, you can get the Creative Cloud subscription for $19.99 a month. I was fortunate to get access to that when I was studying for my master's at Berkeley. So I jumped on that. But yeah, I'd say if you're able to, go for it. So I do plan to relearn Premiere at some point. I've had some tight deadlines lately, so Final Cut has been my NLE of choice as of late.
Awesome. I am opening up the text thread and there you go. By the way,
Yep.
or the chat. So one of the interesting things that happens, just in case you're wondering, first of all, there we go. iPhone with iRig for Facebook streaming. Thanks for everybody that's tuned in. We are really excited about helping out. So just hit us with your questions. We're really here. Oh, Jeff. Hey, Jeff. You've got a text from us. Check your phone. So in any case, let me just kind of take a poke in here and just kind of take a look around here. I am not seeing any questions. Hello. All right. So I'm going to do the traditional thing. Of course, the nice thing to do. Ben, hello. Ronnie, hey. Melissa Doppler, I know you. Ricardo, Paul, Andrew, I know you as well. Russell Keenan, hey, what's going on? Sonny Johnson, Steve Embry, hello. Drew, Roy, Brian, James Murphy, what's going on, dude? Jason, Lori, Rada, hey, what's going on? Long time, dude. That's one of my students from like the Doppler effect days. Mark Swanson, good to see you, bud. Eric Klein, I saw that before. Greg Viederman, the V, another one of my old students. I love it. Tony, what's going on, my friend? Mac, love you, bro. Hope you're feeling well. David, Speedwagoner, Nithin, hello. Colbert, hello from Haiti. Stephen, hello. Gary, great to see you. Michael Austin, hello. Gustavo, I don't know why I'm saying some people's first names and last names, but no test. Hang on a second.
I sent him a PM.
Okay,
So.
good. Thank you so much. And Sabrina, I didn't get didn't show you logging on, but nice to see you. Okay, so everybody, please hit us with your questions. But if you don't have any further ones, I'm just gonna dig in further. We're gonna briefly wrap up this topic of the editors. So here's the thing. I think it was before we reconnected on this thing. I was talking about 4K. Unless you have a smoking fast computer and you have lots of extra time on your hands and want to have copious quantities of data in this moment, if you're wondering, should I do 4K, should I not do 4K? In most cases, shoot 1080p and you're fine. Not only that, I would suggest keeping everything at 30 frames per second and you're going to be very happy. By the way, if you go to hook up your mobile device, well, there's a couple of actually really cool things. This is a brand new piece of gear. And by the way, as guitar players, do we go Boogie? Do we go Fender? Do we go Marshall? Do we go Bogner? We have had gear overload. But there is nothing like the gear overload of the zone that we have stepped into bravely. And it's totally okay. So look, just don't trip. Find what works for you and learn it. But that said, there is always new cool stuff coming out. And this is a brand new box that just showed up from my good friends up at Radial. And what this is Bluetooth DI. Oh my word, I hate unboxing videos, but I think I'm actually doing one live streaming. I can't believe that I've actually ventured forth into it. So the deal is, though obviously you're not going to stream your video over Bluetooth yet, the idea is that this is basically a Bluetooth DI. So you can leave this always connected to your DAW and stream from your phone directly into your audio device. I'm going to take a brief left turn and talk about the beginning of the creative process. Every demo that I've done for hire, and in case you don't know, I've done a lot of for hire demo work. Biggest mistake that I made is that when I did it, I let it all go out on manufacturers' channels. It's over 1 million plays. And I am very grateful for the fact that I have over 1,000 subscribers. The great thing is the people that I get a chance to hang out with, I love dearly, and many of whom I know. But the thing is, that 1 million plays was of great value that I missed. Just saying. So the point being, your iPhone, inside the settings, actually endeavor with me if you'll be so kind. So go to your home screen, hit settings, scroll down, wait till you get to your camera. And when you get to your camera, do me a favor, select it. And then you're going to see record video. And you're going to have a selection menu there. One of the options is 4K at 30 frames per second. That is rad. This is one of the few places that I would suggest, when and where possible, always shoot at 4K. Because it, first of all, you're not always going to have great light. You're not always going to have a great set. And the great thing about having a big video is you can shrink it down and it looks better. The problem is big video has a big footprint. But the thing is, having a 4K video production system here, and I don't have it handy, but Shure makes a microphone called an MV88 Plus that basically comes with an attachment so you can mount the phone on a little tripod. You can also carry it around, and it's got a great mic. That, with this, is absolutely phenomenal. Beginning of the creative process, as I was starting to say a moment ago, always starts with my iPhone. So I will be sitting there with a guitar. If it's a pedal demo, plugged into the pedal on an amp. If it's an amp demo, whatever amp I'm plugged into. If it's a guitar demo, I'm trying to, sometimes I might not even be plugged into what I'm going to end up plugged into, but I have thousands of voice memos here. The great thing about a Bluetooth DI is I can dump those down in the computer. I can keep them as I'm working on a track, and instead of having to go back to my phone, because when you're on the set, guess what happens when you start using your phone? That little sucker just starts going off. And generally speaking, I keep this thing in airplane mode, and quite often I'll try and take it off the set, because being distracted when you're in the middle of a take, I can just assure you. Well, hello, handsome. Jeff
There
Slingloff.
it is.
No, it's the boss. What's going on, Jeff?
Awesome,
How are you,
boss.
man?
Hi guys, how y'all doing?
Better by the second.
Better by the second. You know, things are calming down now. You know, every one of these video streams is yet and always a challenge. You know, I've been doing a lot of these lately, and it's definitely always a challenge. You can hear me okay?
You sound awesome. And you
Awesome.
look marvelous.
Here.
So we were just talking about the beginning of the production process, because I think, you know, this is one of the things is that, first of all, everybody's got their own workflow. And one of the things that's happened recently, Jeff, I'm going to riff on this, then we're going to jump into that which comes next. You good with that? Awesome.
Absolutely.
So the Dreamcatcher family is one of the coolest, of whom Jeff and Andrew are both, I'm sorry, Jeff Slingloff. Let me formally introduce you. How rude of me. Like he's like family. It's just like, that's terrible. So Jeff, what is your official title there in Roland/Boss World?
Technically, I think my title is Strategic Product Manager for Boss and Roland Guitar Products, as I think the technical term they go by. I just kind of say I'm Jeff. Right.
Okay, so over my, what is that? Over my left shoulder, there is a Waza Tube amp expander, which is one of the many brilliant devices he's responsible for. He was also...
Over mine, too.
Oh, there we go. Yep. Also responsible for the DL4 in a previous work environment, but just basically a man of brilliant expertise. But he can also carry on a sentence like a normal human being and hang out, which is kind of rare for somebody of such exceptional talent. Same with Andrew. So I'm outgunned in this experience here. But the neat thing is that our goal here is to give you access to great information. All right, backing up a step. Everybody has a different creative process. But the thing about the iPhone and just being able to record those voice memos for me is a great place to start. So I've got the idea documented, and then my workflow starts and just kind of like, let me capture that with the right gear. I'm either going to use microphones, which is one of the things we're going to talk about, or I'm going to use some sort of capturing device like a reactive load box, which again is on the list of stuff that we're going to be talking about. We're also going to be talking about IRs. And a little bit earlier, and I think it was in the first part of the stream that Facebook was being very unhappy about. The short version is the size of your space is going to have an awful lot to do with what you can pull off production-wise. And so the deal is, if you're in a small space, generally it means that your neighbors are close to you. And that may be your family members, that may be your actual neighbors next door, but that means the amount of volume you can actually make in that space is small. That said, a small space is a lot easier to treat acoustically. The larger the space gets, the harder it is to light, the harder it is to shoot, and the harder it is to treat acoustically. First of all, hello to all the people that just joined. So acoustic treatment is one of the many places that we can spend our money. What I've done is I've made a list of some of the key places that we want to think about investing our money. Musicians are terrible at budgeting. That's why we're musicians. But as you go to do these projects, I would strongly suggest making a budget such that you go into this kind of going, this is what it's going to cost me to do what I really want to do. And then you go, this is what it's going to cost me to do what I can afford. And then you can make some decisions about that. Acoustic treatment is the biggest mistake that most people make. And it's because your listening environment is it's the equivalent of having the world's worst speaker cabinet. And you can't understand why your tone just sucks. You've got a great guitar, you got this great amp, but you have the world's worst speaker cabinet. And one day you plug in all your gear into a great speaker cabinet, you go, and you find all the things you were doing right and all the things you were doing wrong. There's a fine balance between reflection and absorption, but the deal is that going super cheap on the acoustic treatment is going to have some problems. I'm going to rabbit trail ever so briefly and say this. There are a couple of fixes. There's a Waves plugin that I'll get the name of, but I think it's WS43. And what that allows you to, and I'll pull up Pro Tools a little bit later, and I'll show you the plugin, but it allows you to basically choose the frequency at which you're getting the most room reverberation and pull that out. That is a magic plugin. Richard Doyle talked about kind of pulling noise out that's already in the room. I love you to death, Richard. You know that. Stop noise before it starts is really the thing in video. Once it's there, it's nearly impossible to get rid of. Room echo, though, the wave stuff is really, really good at that. But there are ways to keep amps from hissing, and even still getting them at their sweet spot, which is one of the reasons why Jeff is on here. All right, so that is enough yapping. And I'm going to, Sonny, new to guitar. Sonny, I'm going to read your comment here, and oh, I love it. Oh, that's Jeff. Hey, no, that's cool.
So sorry.
No, you're.
Sorry.
Oh, look, wait. Les Paul.
Yes, Les Paul here.
Wait. Oh, look at you with the burst.
Yeah.
When did you get that? I haven't seen you with that.
I've had it for about a year and a half now. And it just,
Wait a second. Was that a B cam?
That is a B cam.
Did you bust out the B cam? Look at that.
I do, right?
Oh,
right?
look at that.
I can even do a C cam. So.
Oh, all right. Awesome. Okay, so. All right,
I probably get fancy and do picture-in-picture. Right.
And you wouldn't happen to be using a Boss VR1 HD, or what do you got there?
Okay, so I'm using a VR4 HD, so it's the bigger brother to the VR1, right? And so it allows for 4 inputs, so it's just a few more inputs on it, a little bit more of a mixer function, but essentially the same type of device, right? Where it can connect directly in via USB into your computer, and I'm routing everything through it. For me, I'm doing a little bit something odd in it, that I have a second computer which has my Pro Tools rig in it, and that's where my Waza TA and all my sound is going through, and so I'm just busing that into it. Then but I also have, for example, the video to that is fed into there, so I can show you guys those things. And also the audio is passing through it, so if I want to play my guitar and my TAE. So I've got everything all bussed in, on this other computer, which I could have done through the mixer that's in the VR4, but just the way my studio is always working, I want to keep my Pro Tools rig working the way it is all the time, and the VR4 is kind of a secondary thing.
Okay,
so, but
we're going to pause that thought right there, and we're going to rabbit trail there slightly. Because and I'm somebody has to play ringleader. So tonight I'm going to do that, but I'm going to try not to do that at the expense of not taking advantage of the great people that are in the room. For those of us that go back into the olden days in Pro Tools rigs, you would have multiple drives inside your Mac computer. One that was for your samples, one that was for running Pro Tools, and the other one that was for your basically to run the system. And the idea is you were making it such that you could, just like we're still doing today, we're still having to find ways to make the most of our computers and have the least amount of latency on input and to get our computers to be able to do the most. So Jeff, I'm curious to know, how are you busing the video between the two computers, and what are the two computers, and how are you connecting things between them?
Okay, so I have the VR4 HD, and the VR4 HD has 4 HDMI inputs on it. It also has an analog input, so I could plug my microphones directly into it, but let's ignore that for a second. Just for a video card input, I have 4 video cards that are coming into it. One of them, I'm using a couple. Let's see. I actually have several of these guys, these little Sony guys, which I like a lot for inexpensive usage because they're about $200 each, and they have you can power them in real time and get a HDMI out of them in real time. Right, so they're inexpensive. I've got 3 of them, so I could do multiple situations. Right now, I've got one plugged into nothing, obviously. One of them that we're looking through, and one of them that is right now looking back at my amp over here. So, and then a 4th HDMI cable is coming from my second computer. So I have that as a second source over there. So I can choose me, camera 1. I can use camera 2. Camera 3 is actually is actually the computer that I'm talking to you through, and then camera 4. And I have camera 3 set up that way so that, like, because I've been doing a lot of video meetings and stuff like that, so I can actually have like a PowerPoint, and I have 2 screens essentially. So I'm treating this as a second screen. So I've got one video capture card or what device, which is the Roland VR4 HD. It's got 4 HDMI inputs coming into it, and 2 of them are cameras, and 2 of them are computers.
Okay.
And that's why I went with the VR4 HD. That's what you're seeing me through right now also.
Yeah, it's really an elegant device, and if you don't know much about anything, it's just like I plugged cameras in and they worked. So it was pretty easy.
It's actually the great thing about the Roland gear is it's very plug and play, which is really awesome. I'm going to show everybody, first of all, invariably somebody is going to, yes, Jeff's setup is awesome. What computers are you using, by the way?
So my main computer that I'm talking to you right now is my main work computer. It's just a MacBook Pro. It's it's like 8 months old. It's not that old at all. The second computer is an older MacBook Pro, which you don't even want to know how old it is. But I have a very ancient Pro Tools rig on it with all of my old plugins and stuff like that. A lot of the plugins that I used in for like, one of the development systems at a former company I was at called Sound Machine, where I made where I did like the Echoplex for Dunlop and the Reverb for Dunlop and stuff like that. We made custom plugins for Pro Tools as individual pieces. Like if I needed an all pass filter or something like that, and then I would build the signal flow in Pro Tools. So instead of building an entire development system with the signal flow, I built it all there. So the reverb was all done in Pro Tools. I did some plugins for Universal Audio, like the Tube Screamer, and a plugin called Woodworks from Sound Machine, right? And they were all just done in a custom version of regular Pro Tools, but I had hundreds of little custom plugins, and right now they only work on that old version. So I have a very ancient version of Pro Tools just to keep those alive for right now.
I love that. Hello, Paul. Okay, that's awesome. So the 2 computer setup. First of all, let's see. Do I dare? Hang on. What have I got going on over here? Let's see. I'm actually going to endeavor to do this. Let's see if I can not get into too much trouble.
What? Doug not get in trouble?
Yeah, no. Too late for that. First of all, hi, Doug. Good on you, mate. Okay. Joe, we're gonna come back to the split desktop thing, but we are gonna talk about because I know a bunch of the people that are in this tonight are music educators. So I want to talk about the world's greatest Zoom hack that I learned from Jeff. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to reposition my Zoom window. So you're going to see this little icon that is going to be over here. There we go. Now this icon right here, turn on or turn off original sound, is the most important thing if you're using Zoom to teach guitar lessons that you're going to want to know about. Now here's the deal: is that little guy you want to, and I learned this from Jeff. You're going to want to make sure it says turn off original sound. It's kind of like a high pass filter. It's exactly named the opposite of what you think it might actually do.
Yes.
But that said, now when I go down into my preferences, though, this is one of the things that I've discovered with a lot of people. And let me just make sure that, hang on, I need to make a change over here in my window here. So just one second. Zoom, let me make sure that Zoom is going to show the right thing. Give me a second. Okay. You guys, I'm going to do a screen sharing thing. Hold on, let me see if I'm going to get this from this direction. Just one sec. All right, so Zoom as my application. That's sharing that. You guys should be seeing that. Share screen. Output should have that set up already. Good. Audio out. Video monitor. Sharing window is on. Okay, good. Let's see if I can do it this way. So if I go to share screen, there we go. So I should now have the ability to go into desktop one. There we go. Let's do that. Let's do it like that. So now, God willing, it's going to be sharing the right screen, which it does not. Yeah, it does. Okay, so here you do.
Yep.
So if you go into your audio settings, hidden down in here in the advanced tab is the most important thing that you want to show in meeting option to enable original sound from microphone. If that's not selected, you ain't gonna see it. The other thing is you
don't have any choice.
You don't have any choice. And I take it, Jeff, you also disable these first two, correct?
Absolutely right.
And
yeah,
then
because yeah.
No, go ahead, please.
No. What you're trying to get into is that a lot of the things that they're trying to do is get rid of background noise and stuff like that, and they're trying to filter it towards the spoken word. All right, so you've got noise gates that are in there, you've got compression that's built in there, you've got filtering that kind of band passes everything. So they're trying to do everything to make your just your laptop computer microphone sound okay-ish. And when we go and we add a professional device that has a professional audio interface, like the VR4 HD, like I'm using, and I try and play something that's harmonically rich, like a distorted guitar, the compression algorithms on them that they use really gets quite cruddy very quickly. So you got to turn off all those things, and you lose some of the benefits of them, like killing some of the background noise and stuff like that. But the benefit of having decent quality sound, I will give up a little bit of noise for any time of day. As Eddie Van Halen told me once, he doesn't like noise gates, right? Because the noise in between keeps him company. Right,
okay.
So
hey, you know what? Looks like we may have a loop back that. So I'm going to get out of this screen now. And I'm going to stop that. We're going to go back to our initial spot here. And that should stop that. Thank you. Who was that sent that through? You lover, you. Nandini, thank you very much.
Nitin and Sunny.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Okay, so, Jeff, yes, thank you.
Yes.
Awesome. That is lovely grooviness. And so you're the guy that showed that to me. As a matter of fact, I guess I should probably turn off original sound. All right, so good. We seem to have eliminated the loop. Would you care to share more about, kind of any more of that? Are we?
No, I think that's one of the primary things, though. It's like, whether you're using Zoom like we are in this case, which is an awesome platform, which a lot of people have been using. In recent times, I've been using a lot of stream audio as well. That's been really fun and interesting. The challenges are, number one, if you're trying to play a musical instrument, guitar, especially distorted guitar, has a lot of harmonics. So harmonics really make data compression show off all of its flaws. cymbal crashes really show off all of its flaws and stuff like that. And, and we're trying to stream in real time, so it's amazing that we can do what we can do. So you got to accept a little bit of a limitation, but going through and figuring out where the noise cancellation of some type is embedded in each of these systems will only be to your benefit. Get on the phone with a friend, have them sit there and listen to you, somebody you trust for your guitar tone. Do some experiments before you get online, to try and do these things live, because you'll crash and burn tone wise very quickly, right? And again, they're doing an amazing job in these programs to try and make it so that it's mid range and focused on my vocal. But as soon as we try and put something full bandwidth, like a guitar, which is got a lot of harmonics in it, it's an immediate problem. Especially drums. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but data compression is done by breaking things up. Whether it's you're talking like a MP3 file or data compression on YouTube or anything, it's done by breaking things up into bands. And the more bands, the better the sound quality. But in order to stream it, it's got fewer bands. And instruments that live in a band are fine, but instruments that cross over bands cause aliasing in between each of them. So like a cymbal crash, most of us think of a cymbal crash as being bright. The cymbal actually starts at a low frequency and shoots to a high frequency and then rolls down again. So it touches every single band. So whether you're trying to do music for a stream like this, or music that is going to be into compressed heavily into an MP3 or something like that, careful of those cymbal crashes, because they're the ones that are going to trigger every one of these issues. And in these programs, just go through and figure out how to turn it back to the original unaltered, uncompressed, unfiltered, unnoise gated sound, and you'll have your best luck.
That's great. Well, that's I teach every Saturday for many hours, and you save my butt. So any of you that are out there looking to do some teaching, it's really, really cool. As a matter of fact, let's see if I can't do a little hack over here on this other computer real quick. While I'm setting this up, Andrew, would you care to share any pearls of wisdom on said subject?
Yeah, so on a similar note, one of the programs that I've only briefly experimented with, but I know several people that are actually watching this use StreamYard, and by default, that application does a ton of compression as soon as you start getting into the upper limits. Like you've got a crank distorted guitar, when you're talking you don't hear it, but as soon as somebody starts playing their guitar amp or their modeler or whatever, even if you're going direct USB out of your modeler, it squashes that instantly. But my buddy Doug DeJong, the other Doug from Down Under, he has a regular stream with another gentleman, Vince, in New York, and they were running into that issue. They seem to have solved it with the settings, but it was like one of those things where nobody noticed until you strike that chord, and 2.5 seconds into it, bam, it's gone. But I definitely noticed it's on more of it depends on the dynamic range. I mean, just like a compressor, right? The threshold I think is pretty high on it, because like Doug would be playing his guitar and you wouldn't really hear it, and then Vince would crank on his that was a little bit louder, and then all of a sudden just everything went to zero. So and I see Jason Price in the chat and some other folks. I know Tom Atkins has been using StreamYard as well to do guitar jams. So yeah, if anybody out there is having issues, dig into the settings just like Doug was describing, and look for ways to turn off some of those automated tools, and it'll make your life a lot better. But again, test. You can never do enough testing.
Exactly.
You think?
And as you just said, it's like you might have it sounding really good, and then all of a sudden you've turned something up just a hair, and they'll kind of fold over on themselves when they get too compressed. They just kill out. Or the other area where they tend to fall apart is if you're playing too soft, right? So you might have tested it, and you finally got it so it sounds really good with like a meaty, somewhat gained, crunchy tone. You're like, okay, harmonics sound decent. I'm loud enough without overblowing the thing. And then you go to your clean sound and you roll off your volume a little bit or play kind of soft, and it starts falling into that noise gate area and it'll try to crunch out. So test it at all spectrums, and and I think one thing that is fortunate is that as we all get into this world of using technology like this, which is just jumped ahead in usage by 5 years. That unfortunately due to the virus and everybody staying at home. One of the things that you definitely see is everybody trying to come up with something this, but what's nice is the audience seem to be forgiving for these sonic issues, right? And we appreciate that, right? As we all trying to like figure out how to fit a square peg into a round hole. The audience has been for all the different things I've done, whether it's a one-on-one thing or a private thing with a dealer or public, that they've all been genuinely really really great. And so we obviously appreciate that as we all try and figure it out. But the big problem is, again, just got to figure out how to turn off their noise suppression. And also, the next thing that's going to come in as soon as you figure out the noise suppression is you're going to probably have to figure out the potential for an echo, right? Because there's echo cancellation, and usually the echo cancellation needs to go off, and you need to find out what's causing it and see if you can figure it out. For example, the easy thing is headphones is one of the ways where people run into noise echo problems, is because if you're all using headphones, then it cuts it down easily, and you can get rid of that echo cancellation. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a long enough in-ear monitor, so I have to use large things today, but that's okay. Right, Roland owns V-Moda, and so I've got nice V-Moda headphones, and you guys sound gorgeous to me.
There you go.
I
Yeah,
love,
a note on the headphones too. Since I'm the only one not in ear or headphone monitoring in this chat, it's some people like to have their ears breathe, and they don't like being constricted by headphones. Especially, I know a lot of guitar players are like that. I don't have an issue with it, but one of the downsides of not doing that is I can't hear myself, so I don't know the proximity effect of this microphone right now. I've used this several times, so I kind of know where to keep my voice and my face and how it reacts, but I don't have the benefit of hearing myself because I'm not monitoring through the VR4 HD's headphone out to hear myself. I have the audio coming over the speakers on a separate audio interface, so that's just something to note if you're not experienced or sure about how you're coming across, or you want to make sure you're always coming across consistently to your audience. Have a way that you can hear yourself. Obviously not over speakers, you're going to have an echo, but
I'm going to jump on that. That word to the wise there. A couple of things related to that. One of the things that Andrew and I are working on is finding some solutions, and I'm going to kind of show my A computer here, because I basically have my Pro Tools computer and then I have my streaming computer, and it's basically exactly what Jeff was talking about doing. Is there are some interesting anomalies that you'll discover. One is that if you're by chance doing a stream and you want to reply to people, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the multi-streaming stuff that I'm doing over here using RTMP, which is more than most of you will ever need to do, but eventually you're going to go, you know what, I want to connect to, although Facebook was not particularly friendly the first time around, RTMP allows you, it's a protocol that allows you to use a stream key and lock in the stream, and I would say 85% of the time, judging by percentage of tonight, once it grabs a hold of the stream, you're good. And it's a protocol that enables you to basically, it's like two phone numbers calling each other, and they got a connection. Once they're locked in, it's usually pretty good. Getting to this A computer thing for the guitar teacher folks, it doesn't matter whether you're on an A computer or a B computer. That is to say, A being the first in line, the B being the second in line. But I'm going to do a little screen share here, and I think it's going to jump over from my A computer and feed in. There we go. Doug Doppler starts. There we go. So look at that guy. So for those of you that are guitar teachers, what's neat about Zoom is you can have a screen share feature that allows you to pull up your stuff there. And so I could be noodling over here on the little side screen that you got over here, and then there's the lesson material, and that's really handy to be able to do that. The other thing that I can then do is I can go into a new share, and I can go, okay, well, hey, I want to talk to you guys about how I'm using my Universal Audio console. All right, and this is going to be important for a number of you folks, because here's one of the big things that as you kind of get more sophisticated as to what you're doing versus, hey, I'm just streaming out to some folks, this guy is going to mute my audio like right. Sorry, you'll see that the light goes, but my voice is about to. So the thing is, the way that audio is routed in here, I actually have Chris Stark again to thank on this, is basically input number one here on the console is where my guitar likes to go in. And so even though it's muted on input on console here, what it actually does is it passes audio through the internal busing of the flippin' computer. And so basically if I'm playing in an application like this right here, this guy will be passing audio internally inside the computer out of the plugin, but the computer does not know to not process the direct signal. And I have Chris Stark to thank for that. And he's like, last Wednesday, we were getting ready to do the stream, and he's like, oh, I can hear your direct guitar. There are places where audio will leak that you can't hear it. There is nothing like audio leaking in places that you can't hear it. The other thing that you want to be aware of, and just so you know, I'm actually going to do another screen share. I'm going to move on here. So let's say I jump over to the right version of Google Chrome. I think it's going to be this one right here, maybe. So let's say I'm over here. Well, I actually jumped over here. So let's say I jump back, and I'm purposely going to create an echo here, but I'm going to do so for a very short period of time. So let's say you're over here. Hi, Nandini. I'm going to minimize you there. And you're like, hey, I actually want to see what's going on in my chat. I want to check out the comments. So you actually want to go, you click on the comments, and what starts to happen in a moment, this computer, in theory, will jump up and allow me to view chat. I can actually just go back and get the same thing to happen. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go like this. And what ends up happening, as soon as this guy pops up like this, even if you've got it muted, once this thing is done loading, come on, baby, this little volume fader here automatically, even if you had it muted before, there you go, it goes all the way up. And basically you've got an audio leak, which is a disaster because, come on, baby, generally speaking, you won't hear this little volume fader here. So it's passing automatically around where
you have it still going right now because you clicked on it.
And basically you've got an audio. No, it's muted now.
Yeah, it was in a second.
Okay, thank you so much. So there.
That's the thing with Facebook, though, is that it doesn't behave like a traditional media player. You go to click on it to pause it, and it like blows it up.
And the audio turns all the way up. So just and the instinctive thing is because you can't actually reply to the chat in the other window. So you're like, I want to see what people are doing. Now, the thing that you can do is, depending on the view, sometimes the other window will allow you to scroll, but sometimes it doesn't. So just be forewarned. So the thing is I'm going to show you guys one other little trick here, and then we want to make the most of our buddy Jeff's time here. Hang on. Let's make sure that I can preview this appropriately. And I think I should be able to. Just one last second. Back over to Zoom, share screen. And I should be able, there we go. So, no, hang on a second. Give me one moment. I want this, actually. There we go. All right, so good. You're up and running now. You should be visible. And, okay, hang on a second. I need to back out of there. Where did that preference go? Okay, hold on. No, okay, hang on a second. It didn't see it because I launched it afterwards. All right, now it'll see it in theory. So, one of the tricks that you can do, there we go. No, it's not showing that window. All right. Okay, well, one of the tricks that you can do is there are some tools in your audio media setup, and there's some tweaks that you can make in there that can allow you to route some of the audio in different ways by setting up an aggregate flow of audio inside there. And so with a little trick, we're going to be able to use a secondary audio interface as a secondary input source around what I'm using as my Universal Audio Apollo, and that's how I'm going to be able to get in and create some sound with that standalone plugin without actually getting that direct signal to come back into something like Zoom. So you're basically creating an internal hack, but there's all these crazy workarounds that you're going to just find. Right now, the stuff doesn't breathe that well together. Gentlemen?
So true.
So Doug DeJong mentioned that Facebook is beta testing this thing called Facebook Producer, which will drop a link in the chain to like, and I think it's kind of like StreamYard, sounds like, where you can invite people in real time. And I think Instagram actually is already doing that too, where you can, while you're broadcasting, you can invite members from the audience to join in. So I'm sure Facebook and everybody is aware of how important streaming is to the world, and I'm sure they're all clamoring to get their usage statistics up. That everybody wants to be king, so I only expect things to get better from here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right. And it's like, so far there are things about each that I like and dislike and stuff like that. Like Stream has some really nice, elegant things to do. Like, for example, it has a green room effect, which green room means that you could have, like, if you didn't want to talk to me just yet, but you wanted me to, I'm coming up in 10 minutes, you can put me off in this green room and I'm sitting there and I can, see what you guys are doing, but until you bring me in, I can come in. It has a good ability to, do some text and stuff like that on it. But I've had the most problems with trying to get clean, non-echo experience through StreamYard, and have had to come up with some quirky workarounds, similar to what Doug was saying earlier. Like one of the things I ended up doing, which works out really nicely, is I just take the output from the analog just headphone jack from my laptop into my Pro Tools rig, and I'm sending the, just like you would do on a mixing console, I'm sending a Q mix to here, so I can hear my guitar, I can hear you guys, and but I don't have any chance for the audio to ever feed back into the stream, so I don't have to worry about any echo cancellation or anything like that, because it's all being dealt sort of offline. A friend of mine is doing something similar where he just takes both into a small analog mixer and then does his headphone out of that, and that releases any possibility of it, because again, sometimes the echo cancellation is part of the thing that will ruin your tone. So if you can, for those of us who are music worried and tone worried, that's a nice way to elegantly remove it from the equation. So he bought some little inexpensive, like $75 mixer, runs both computers into it, and he can hear what's going and what's coming, and nobody crisscrosses in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, on that note, because I've done exactly that, Jeff. But just to give a shout out to your guys' own product, because I'm using like I said, the VR4 HD, same as you right now. That's been a godsend, is the loopback function. So which I think you were alluding to when you said you could do it all off one computer. That's something that I run into with a lot of guitarists or other musicians that have like backing tracks and things they want to play from their computer or their Pro Tools session, or even people doing an interview, with a Zoom call or something, and they say, well, how do I get that, back into the computer to stream? And the way you'd have to do it before, which is kind of what you're doing right now, is you'd have to have another audio interface and then bring the analog outputs. And I actually had to, when I first started streaming years ago, I ran into that same issue coming out of my Pro Tools rig, and fortunately I had my little Sonic Port VX. Everybody knows that little guy, like the little Swiss Army knife in your gig bag, and it's like, hey, stereo inputs, and fortunately you can use multiple audio interfaces, with a Mac system, unlike Windows, but a lot of audio interfaces, a lot of new Focusrite, like the Gen 3 stuff, has a loopback feature. Some of the Yamaha stuff does. I've got a little actual Yamaha, I think it's the AG6 mixer that has
Mhm.
USB-C, and that has a loopback function. Of course, the Roland streaming mixers have it. But that's like a term I've noticed a lot of people aren't aware of. So if you remember anything from this, loopback function if you want to restream something out of your computer.
Right, exactly, right. And even things like for those of us who out there who maybe just want to work on a live stream, we do have some simpler products. VR4 HD like I'm using is pretty sophisticated. You're using the same thing. There's a VRR1 HD, and you can even get down into like some of the problems like the Go Mixer and the Go Mixer Pro, right?
Yeah, those
And they're
things are
very
sweet.
inexpensive. And yeah, and those are great because you can use, for example, like two iPhones or an iPhone and an iPad and do multiple cameras just with those two. And there's a editable switcher inside of it, so you can do everything via software. You can go stream straight to USB out of it from your phone, and you can literally have a full virtual video site right from it. And it has line in and XLR in, so everything we're doing at a grander scale, it can be done for a fairly affordable thing, starting with something like that, right? Even when I first started doing these video things, I didn't have all the cameras. I just got a cable. I had the VR4 HD because one of the benefits of working for the company is I write an email and something shows up in my house, and that's what I asked for, right? Which was important because of what we're doing. But one of the first things I did before I had cameras was I was using my iPad and my iPhone as cameras, and I just got a cable to connect it via HDMI, and I used them as cameras. And they're really impressive for the fact that I already had them. They were sitting there. I just got like a little table, and was doing that for a while, and that worked out great. So, there's
Absolutely.
really.
One of the recent additions. So up until yesterday, I had 4 cameras coming into this thing, but I just finished putting this new studio desk together at 4 a.m. this morning. So I was
4
rushing to
a.m.
get.
You
Yeah.
must be a guitar player.
Yeah, exactly, right. We're all night owls. So I got enough together so I could be in this stream tonight. But what I typically use, like you, I've got a Canon camcorder that's this A cam right now, because it has a clean HDMI out. My DSLR.
Andrew,
Oh yeah,
what is clean HDMI out?
I was about to
Okay,
describe
all
this. So
right.
my DSLR, which is the nice cameras with the removable lenses for those that aren't into photography, which is right here. This does not have a clean HDMI out. So what that means is, even though it's got an HDMI port and I can plug it into this VR4, you can get rid of all the information that you'd normally see on the rear screen here, except for the focus boxes,
Mm-hmm.
unless you go into manual focus. But then when you do that, you're limited. Like I actually used to use this right in front of my computer, but the thing was, like, if I moved back or forward, or I wanted to show the audience something on camera, then it'd be out of focus because it was stuck in manual focus. So unfortunately, the next version of this is an 80D. The 90D has clean HDMI out, and I'm not hopeful that they will do a firmware update or something to make this do it. So I might just have to upgrade. But the other 2 cameras I use are actually GoPros. So I like them because they're small. They go up to 4K. They're Hero 8 blacks. The downside is the newer one, the 8 Hero 8 black. You have to buy this extra media mod to get the mini HDMI out, because it now uses a USB-C and they don't give you the video out of the USB-C natively. So you have to get their little cradle there. But the Hero 7s, which are cheaper and they'll still do 4K, will allow you to do that. Take HDMI out from there, and those also offer a clean HDMI output as well. So typically, what I have is, you can't see it; it's out of frame, but I have a guitar workbench where I do some like pickup swaps, string setups, and all those facing downward, looking at the bench. And then I
Mm-hmm.
have another one that I use for looking around the room and whatnot. So, yeah, just a little bit about, like, you can use all kinds of cameras. I've seen tons of people using iPhones or their old iPhones, right? They'll upgrade and get a new one and they didn't trade in the old one. Rather than recycling it or going through the hassle of trying to sell it, just use it as a camera for your system.
Yeah, and for me, I had a similar problem. I had, started ordering some cameras that were inexpensive, trying to get up and running quick and down and dirty when this whole, stay at home thing kicked in. And, the first problem I ran into is the first couple things I got were they didn't have a clean HDMI out. It always had some form of text on screen or something like that. Finally, I found these little Sonys. Let me switch this over to you guys. These guys, the HDR CX405, they're $200 ish, and they were really good at, they have a HDMI straight out on it, and so that's really easy to use. Otherwise, I'd be kind of stuck. Right? So that's also great alternative. So a couple of those, and like a VR1 or VR4 HD, that's one way to go. A more inexpensive way, as I said, would be with like a GoPro, Go mixer from Roland, right? That's with your iPhone. It's the fastest way to get up and running, probably.
So, Jeff, I had a question on those Go mixers. Since those are streaming still through your phone's native app, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, for those who haven't tried it yet, unless you have 1,000 subscribers, you can't stream from a mobile device to YouTube. So that's something to be aware of, which I found out right before I was going to go live. When I decided, let me go into my iPad for this stream because it's going to be really simple, and I didn't want to set up this was before I had the Roland mixer. So I was doing like all these webcam hacks to get my nice cameras into my computer without HDMI to USB card. So I was trying to do it from the iPad, and one cool thing though is I actually had my Helix going into my iPad as my audio interface. So I was able to have my mic and guitar, everything through one little adapter that's floating around here somewhere, but lightning to USB. So you could do that with any class compliant device that class compliant audio interface. But then I got hit with you're not allowed to stream because you don't have 1,000 subscribers yet. So Doug mentioned it's a little advanced, not to get off on too much of a tangent, but Doug mentioned RTMP. So if you were going to something like Restream, which Doug uses, and there's I think our buddy Tom that's on the chat here uses caster.io, any of those kind of restreaming services. I think that would be your workaround to be able to stream to YouTube without the minimum, but through their own app they don't let you do it. So
right. Well, and one of the amazing things about where we are right now, it's like 30 years ago, if it was a TV show on at 7 o'clock on Tuesday night and you got home 20 minutes late, you missed 20 minutes of it. Nowadays everything replays, but replays at such a rate that is crazy, right? Like there's a lot of these that I've done, for Boss and stuff like that, where at the time of the recording, like we are now live on Facebook, there might only be 50 people there, and you're like, oh man, there's only 50 people there, right? And then you start looking at the retweets or the the different ways that it lingered out, over the next, and then 3 days later, you're like, it hit 20,000 people, and you're like, so one of the things is that you want to treat these as if you're live, but also realize that don't be depressed if you look up and you're like, oh, only 15 friends came in, because it's really how they live and linger and grow. And that's one of the great powers of the internet, and that's one of the great powers of people like being able to come in and re-see this 4 hours from now or 4 days from now. Don't get disappointed by the live event if everybody wasn't there, because they're coming, right? And just keep it going, right? And one of the things, if you're trying to do live events, do some research on how to remarket and retag and remove things, and get it to go further. Because that's a great education field to teach yourself a bit about, and there's a lot of good videos on YouTube and stuff like that to try and figure that out. But that's another thing. It's don't be disappointed about what you get in the live stream itself. It can have a life that is much bigger than that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's if for anybody that's trying to make any type of living or secondary income or something out of social media video, right? That's what it's all about. It's all about the replays, the remarketing of existing content, so you don't have to, you know, make. I mean, you have to keep making more, but you don't have to like rely on just the fresh stuff, right? It's all about the replays.
It is it's about the replays, and it's like one of the very first ones I did for Boss. It was one of the first times we would try to get up and running, and like my coworker and buddy, Aaron Marino, who you guys know, he's trying to work on it with me. Austin, who you guys also know, Austin Sandick, from Boss. We're have a set time. It's supposed to come on at like 6 o'clock, and our very first time we did it, we could not get it to connect to Facebook. It just would not connect, and we literally handed it around, because it wouldn't try. Aaron had plenty of bandwidth. We kept testing, right? And it took us 40 minutes to get on the first time. And it was like one of these weird things. It just, there was plenty of bandwidth, but it couldn't get on the stream for some reason. And finally, so we zoomed into each other, and there's one Zoom, but then it was like, okay, so, Aaron, it's not working from your house, so switch it over to Sean Kelly, who worked with us. Sean did it. He couldn't do it. Then Aaron tried again. Then finally Austin tried it in New York, and then it grabbed, and we were up and running. So also plan for backups. Like plan for an alternate. If you have two people, have them both set up so that they're ready to go with the account name and stuff like that. So if one of them can't get on Facebook, it isn't that Facebook can't handle the stream. It's that Facebook in that region, in that town right now, has had probably too many people try and do a live thing, and they've only got so many ports. Right? Globally, they've got 1 million that are open and free doing nothing. So and so if you can't do it, then Doug can do it, and if Doug can't, then I can, and we'll hit it in a different neighborhood, and you'll having a backup friend, phone a friend quickly, right?
That's awesome.
Exactly.
Hey, I want to jump in since we were talking about this concept of. Let's do a little bit of this here. There we go. Hey, let's talk a little bit about the whole restream side of things. So I'm going to do a share here, and let's see how well this actually behaves in the midst of doing all of this. So first of all, let's jump into into Google Chrome here, and I'm going to navigate between a couple of different windows here real quick as we do that, and hopefully the audio will behave appropriately. Let's see how we do. And let's see, that is not streaming downstream, so hang on a second. All right, there's another way to do this. Give me just a moment. I'm gonna have to do this another way. All right, got it. Give me just a moment. I'm gonna have to do this like this. Are you not grabbing? There we go. Live sharing window. That should get us there. And it is. Let's see if it's going to be nice and let us do that. Let's get over to this application here. And how are you going to? There we go. Good. All right. Let's get over to the application window. There we go. All right. Let's get over to Google Chrome. There we go. All right. So now what you're looking at, and it does not look like there is any leaking audio here. But what we've got here is basically my setup as I'm kind of working through all this good stuff. So this is right here. First of all, is this application that I use called Restream, and this is where very interestingly enough, it's showing that these are saying that they're offline, which is very strange because they're not. That's really funny. This should blatantly be saying that it's online. But basically what these are RTMP connections. And as you kind of get over into Facebook here, which is so funny. It says that I'm not streaming, but I am. These guys right here are basically, this is basically like a phone number. And this is kind of the, if you will, the security code for that phone number. So basically you go into the settings here, and let's go in and without doing anything, that's basically where you input that data. And this allows me to choose where it is that I'm basically streaming to on both. This is basically DD Facebook, and then this is on my YouTube. And so that allows me to create inside both YouTube via the stream key that's right there, and in Facebook via the stream key that's right there, those handshakes. And those guys are very valuable to just kind of be able to know what they are. And the interesting thing about this whole process that's happened is that initially, when you're multi-streaming to multiple platforms, I wasn't having to use the RTMP, but literally kind of overnight, the API that was happening in the back end of YouTube just changed. And so what ends up happening is you kind of eventually go, all right, if I'm having a problem connecting, the neat thing is RTMP is a relatively fail-safe way of getting on there. Now, interestingly enough, the first handshake that we had tonight with Facebook was absolutely abominable. And so every so often you are actually forced to dump the stream and just reconnect. And since we did that, it's been much better. But the idea of being able to manipulate that is actually really important. So let's see here. So let me get out of this mode here, and let me jump back to this guy right here. So jumping out of this screen and jumping back over to Zoom. And there we go. All right. So with that said, there was a question here from Nathan. Doug, not a video question, but definitely a content creation one. In our draw of choice, how would you walk someone through getting a good room amp-like tone out of a VST once happens to have Amp Sim 101? So this is going to be a great place for us to rabbit trail, because there are multiple ways to skin a cat. So let's go down the list of ways that we can do this, and then I want to obviously open it up for some Wazatube amp expansion on the thought. One, there are a ton of great plugins. The interesting thing is that some of these load in different DAWs and some don't. So there are a couple of little workarounds here, and one of which I'm going to run you through right now, that basically allows you to load any plugin that you want in basically any computer. So let me just do a little screen share over here, and I'm going to give you Gig Performer. Where are you, baby? There we go. All right. Give me just one moment. Let me close the amp up in Gig Performer, and you're going to go like this. All right, there we go. All right, so Gig Performer, there we go. So this is an application from Plugin Alliance called Gig Performer, and what this enables you to do is basically load some really rather crafty signal chains here. So effectively what I've got is I've got Fluff's 5034 there. That's not showing those as they pop up. Okay, so basically this is the amp. I'm basically taking a stereo feed out of here to feed a delay, taking a stereo feed out of there to feed a reverb, running that in stereo into a stereo mixer, and in turn that's running back down into the output 1 and 2 back into Universal Audio. So what's neat about this is that I could load any plugin that I might want to in here. So let's just say I wanted to add a plugin. I can literally, all of my plugins, any of my plugins I can load in here. And so what's neat about this is that, if you want to run a VST, or you want to run an audio units, or any of these different types of plugins, they can run on a system where, whether you're running Pro Tools, whether you're running Logic, it doesn't matter. And so what's neat about this is you can in turn do some routing with this and run it into your DAW, and that's pretty crafty. So that's a nice workaround. That means that basically any of the plugin amp sims that you wanted to use, you can use inside Pro Tools. There's also some audio wrappers that you can use to do the same thing. But what's neat about that is that allows you to kind of create a signal chain that you don't have to necessarily have Pro Tools open. So, with that said, that's one of the ways in there, and there's a million great amp sims that are out there. There's also this lovely box to the right hand side of Jeff Slingluff that you can see, and you can also see behind my left shoulder there. There we go, called the Waza Tube Amp Expander. And Jeff, why don't you go ahead and tell us about the glory of that lovely box there, please?
Okay, so the Waza Tube Amp Expander is a reactive load device, right? Now, first off, a reactive load device is a device that acts like a speaker cabinet, right? So when you plug your tube amplifier into it, it will act as a speaker cabinet. And people don't realize that a speaker cabinet is more than just an absorption of power, right? Like the old power soak type things that we used to do in like the 80s and early 90s. It actually has movement, and the speakers move, and they're like a spring, and as they move, the impedance of the spring feeds back into the amplifier. You change this all the time in the form of the impedance as far as your presence knob in your amp is actually the impedance of your speaker feeding back into your amplifier. So you want a reactive load device if you're going to try and attenuate your amplifier. And the reason for that is to protect the amplifier and to give it the feel and sag and everything that it's supposed to get. So Waza Tube Amp Expander gives you 16 different reactive loads, which are important because then you can crank up your amp and get the feel, which is a whole other thing which I can dive into for hours about why you might like to have your amp. I can maybe even demonstrate it for you if you guys wanted to get into that. But along with that, the Tube Amp Expander allows us to have effects, reverb, delay, EQ, as it's feeding out either a direct out to my DAW, as we're doing right now. I'm connected that way. I can do cab simulation, mic simulation from it. I can load IRs in it as well. So, which is really cool because I can actually match the reactive load to the cabinet, which is really cool, which you can't do with any other device. And also, it allows all the effects and everything you have going inside of it, not only to go out to your DAW or to a front of house if you're doing a live situation, but it allows it to come through the live speaker cabinet in the room with you. So what's really extremely cool about that is that I can actually have my amp cranked up. My Marshall that's sitting here right now, my master volume is on 10. It is dimed. And, it's dimed, and I can have silence in this room. I have a continuous attenuator on it, so I can be, down really super quiet, or I can crank it up, to the full 100 watts, no problem at all. But all the effects and stuff that I would do inside of it, I can actually do through the live cabinet. So unlike a lot of the reactive load devices that have been out there, which are only one reactive load, if they are reactive, it's got 16. I can mix and match those for fun, for taste, or to match my IRs for direct recording. But whatever I do as far as those presets and rigs, I can now take it to the live gig, and it's doing it through the live speaker cabinet and also doing it out the XLR for the house. And in addition to all that, so it also has a lot of the a USB direct out on it, so that I can actually use it as an audio interface. So I have literally set in a hotel room with this laptop, these headphones, and a 100-watt Marshall, and a Waza TA dimed at 2 in the morning in a hotel room, and just recorded straight in my laptop, no problem at all. So it's a really cool device, because once you have it in your system, it's not something just as a solution that is a way to get into my DAW. One of the things like you were just showing a bunch of software plugins, which are great, but how do you take that live, and vice versa, right? If you love your tube amplifier or whatever it is live, how do you get it at home in studio? This kind of bridges that gap that makes your whole rig useful in any scenario. Because one, if you're playing on a big stage, some artists are now more and more, everybody's using in-ear monitors, so you don't need a lot of stage volume. So you could show up to the gig with no speaker cabinet at all, or have some low volume cabinet on stage as a confidence monitor, but you still have reverb, delay, and everything on stage. If you go to rehearsal, where you got to get louder because you're not going through the PA system, there's a couple places I practice at in Los Angeles with my band, and they have signs on the wall: do not plug your multi-effects processor into the PA system. Do not plug your DT1000 or your Helix. They don't want it going through the PA because they're afraid that you're going to blow it. So you have to take an amplifier with you. So you need to be loud enough to get over your drummer. And then when you're at home, you're sitting there turning down the master volume. And this is the reason why you want, a reactive load device for your amplifier, is that tube amplifiers dynamically work with the power amp, and the tubes all interact with each other based on volume. So if you turn down the master volume, here's the thing most people don't realize, is that the last tube is really the first tube to start distorting. So, each tube adds a little bit of gain, adds a little bit of gain, adds a little bit of gain. So a little tiny bit of gain at the front end and starts to clip the last tube. And you guys have, we've all said it. I've bought a distortion pedal to push the front amp, which it actually is, not true. You're actually pushing the back end of the amplifier. And the master volume comes before those last tubes, which should be the first ones to clip. So if you turn it down, now the tubes don't clip. So that's part of your tone just as far as the clipping, but even more interesting is the dynamics of your amplifier is a function of clipping those. They rob voltage, or ask for voltage from the filter caps. The filter caps, they then start robbing voltage from all the other tubes. And there's this whole undulating interaction between all of them, right? And it's literally, the thing that I love about tube amplifiers is that it's an organic experience, as a guitar player, but it's an organic experience from the input jack to the speaker. The speaker moves, its impedance affects, what's clipping in the power amp and the transformer distortion. That hits the filter caps, which ripple back all the way to the first tube. So there's this whole organic experience. And what I love about the Wazoo Tube Amp Expander is I get all of that. I get it through the live cabinet. I get it through, the direct out. I get it through the PA system at any volume. And so it's really, the way to go for me in a lot of scenarios, because I can use any of my favorite amps around the house in any scenario.
I love that. So let me see if I can bring up a video here, and pass some audio here, because it's actually me using the daylights out of the Wazoo Tube Amp Expander in a for-hire situation. And then Jeff, we got to give the guitar players some. So I know you're all queued up there. So it's essentially the distillation of the EQ section from the Schaefer Vega. Let's see, is that going to pass audio there?
Yes, we can hear
David Gilmour and Joe Perry.
Right,
hang on an amazing sound.
Find the spot.
All right. Where, let's see here. You know what? Here we go. This will be down the next shot. All right, let's believe it's going to pass it on to the rest of the feed. Hi, I'm Doug, and welcome to. If you're going to do you're going to play some video for people, you actually do a screen share, so they can actually see what they're watching. Hang on a second, I want to play the last little bit of this because it's really this thing doing its magic. So basically, in a moment you'll see. There we go. Down the next shot. All right, just one sec. So this is a demo I did for the Solo Dallas folks. And there we go. All right, good. You're queued up, ready to go. Let's do a little shared desktop, and hopefully everybody out there will actually be hearing this downstream. And I'm going to turn my audio up just a little bit there, and let's do a screen share. And you. All right, here we go. Cheers. that is a pretty groovy little box there, Jeff Slingluff.
Well, first off, that was some pretty groovy little playing there, right, that you were doing. I am always impressed by Doug's playing, and sometimes we always see him in different scenarios, right? Doing all the shreddy stuff, and I've seen him, had the pleasure of seeing him just sit down with like a good rhythm and stuff like that, and every aspect of your playing really just is always freaking awesome. So it's great to hear you, right? And the tone was really nice. Thanks for using the Waza TA on that.
So you're very, very welcome. So the amazing thing is like there were all these different amps, and everything was using. Hold on, let me unpin you there so we can look like we're having a conversation. There we go.
There you go. Your level just came back up. I don't know if a compressor kicked in or something, but
Okay.
you were really low for a while.
All right. Glad to be back. All right. So the neat thing is that what that enabled me to do was to take all those different amplifiers. So and that deluxe was cranked. So there was and just all those different flavors of amplifiers, and to be able to add the built-in effects and be able to add the reactive load. So and to have that just be able to be so immediate, but at any volume was just phenomenal. And the neat thing is to be able to, so the Solo Dallas, it's kind of a boost, but kind of not, but kind of is. And so to be able to get those amps in the zone where they just talk with that, honestly, I wouldn't have been able to do that without the Waza Tube amp expander. Just an amazing piece of gear.
Thanks. Yeah, it's one of those things that first off, the onset of reactive loads there's several manufacturers that have been coming out with them that's been really, really cool. But it's a device that I've wanted for years. I remember, when I was doing the pod back at Line 6, there was a desire to try and use the cab simulation from that, for something similar to this. But really, the problem was always trying to get to a point where the reactive load was letting the amplifier work as it does, right? And that is the key. And one of the things that I really love about this guy is because it has 16 reactive loads. So there's a bunch of different devices that have come out that are claimed to be reactive load devices, but their frequency response is different, their impedance response is different, and when we say 8 ohms or 16 ohms, guitar speaker cabinets aren't 8 ohms or 16 ohms, right? They're all over the place based on frequency. So 8 ohms is sort of like the DC measurement of them. So one, to get the right frequency-based impedance load is part of the design of an amplifier. So when you talk to somebody who's designing a boutique amplifier or something like that, they know what speaker they're working with, and they're designing the amount of negative feedback to kind of align with the impedance of the speaker, and the speaker becomes part of what fundamentally alters the tone of the amplifier. It's a current-based system, and you'll get this as well on the Katana amplifiers. Even though they're solid state, they've actually we figured out how to use the impedance of the speaker to interact with the amplifier and get that's part of the cut through and the throw and tone that we call tube logic. But and figuring that out is actually where TAE comes from, because there was development tools to try and figure that out, and those were these boxes sitting in Japan, and and there was one for Greenback 5 cabinet, one for Vintage 30 cabinet, and they had these big boxes, and it's like, well, wait a second, what is that? Right? And they had figured out how to do the reactive load, and that was their testing method to try and figure out tube logic, which ended up in the other amplifiers. And it's like, well, if we stuck that into here, and here, add some features. So it's funny because it was a development tool that turned into a product for customers, and to have a reactive load that is correct. As I said, if you have a 412 cabinet and your reactive load device is tuned to a 112 deluxe, that's going to change a little bit of the transformer distortion. It's going to change a little bit of how the presence knob works and the low frequency resonance. If you're calling up an IR or a cab simulation and you want to match it, earlier today I found this awesome 212 Vox AC30 IR that I had made years ago, and it was very Brian May. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. If I set the resonance right to be an AC30, call that thing up, it's like, and even though I'm using a Marshall and a Les Paul, I was getting a pretty phenomenal AC30 cabinet. In fact, I might even be able to.
I was going to say, do you have that handy?
Give me 2 seconds and let's see if that's here. because I don't know about you guys, I'm a big Brian May fan.
Oh
So
yeah.
there you go. Uh-oh. That's why you get for playing sitting down, right? So, but anyways, that.
No, that was in this.
So it's got that total.
That's great.
Like, right, and that I got that sound for that cabinet by microphone kind of between the two speakers a little bit more, so you get a little bit of comb filtering between the two of them. Typically we try and get isolated and stuff like that, but I remember seeing these videos of Brian May, and and I remember seeing it it was like a U67 just hanging over the cabinet, like halfway in the middle of the amp, and I'm like, that's what I got to do. So that's how I got that impulse when I did it, and so I just set that thing to match the reactive load to that. But let me go back here and unplug myself and come back. Hang on, killed my headphones, and now I set it for more of a greenback 25, and if I'm not mistaken, this will give me a little bit. So it allows me to really kind of dial in, my cabinet to match the tone that I'm going for, because the amplifier now thinks it's connected to that speaker cabinet. The amplifier is getting the resonance from that. It's getting the transformer distortion as if it's connected to that speaker, and it would be different, so depending on what's going on there. So you can change the cabinet, but the cabinet is just filtering. The reactive load is harmonics and interaction with the power amp itself. So by being able to call, yeah, it's a cool setup because I can really get anything I want dialed in there. And then, as I said, any effects that are in there, like if I want to add a delay or reverb or anything like that, it's all available to you as a DI out, but it's also available through the live speaker cabinet, and it's the only device that does that. So my rig at home is the same as it is here, as it is anywhere else. I also have global EQ, so I can change the EQ cabinet, the tone of my live cabinet. I can do things like it's got an effect send and return. How many of us have an old Marshall or something like that we've taken and had somebody modify, and it doesn't ever quite sound quite right after you put that effects send and return in it, right? So if you got a classic old amp, an old AC30, an old Twin, an old Deluxe, a Bassman, you can plug into this guy and add an effects loop, and it's a serial or parallel pour -10, and I get everything there. One of the things that's really interesting is a lot of times for any gain and distortion, we like delays and things like that post. That's more modern type sound that's going on there. What I found is the other day I was running a delay in the effects send and return. Right now, that Marshall is actually on 10. And it being on 10, if I put anything in its effects send and return, what happens to it is it might as well be pre-distortion. That delay is getting totally crumbled up and it's getting full distortion from the power amp section. Being able to put it post that in the effects send and return of the Waza TAE, it sounds like I put on a nice studio delay even through the live cabinet. So it's pretty fundamental.
Including an SDE 3000.
An SDE 3000, which is in the software as well, right? So that's one of my old favorites, and it's still one of my favorites, right? The SDE 3000, which is one of the bases for most of the Boss delays. If you go from anywhere from a DD3, DD2, DD7, the core delay sound is based off of an SDE 3000 that was morphed over, and somehow they managed to put it in a little tiny pedal.
That's
Nice.
that's Boss for you. Andrew, what do you got?
No, I was just going to point out that this was a very similar conversation Doug and I had. I think it was last week or a week before on a stream about we were talking about speaker modeling and amp modeling, and so more of the digital space. But I think it's all still relevant in that we talked about how guitarists often underestimate the importance of the speaker cabinet and the signal chain, which is exactly what you've demonstrated for us right now. And one of the things we used to say around the office when I was at Line 6 and we were developing Power Cab was it's like wine pairings, right? Like you talked about how boutique amp designers are designing that amp to work with a certain speaker, right? And
Hmm.
it's you plug that into totally different. Let's say you designed it for a Jensen, and you plug it into a vintage 30, and now it behaves completely different. That's why I think a lot of guitarists might overlook some of those details, which are critical, right? Because that's like your final stage of your your output.
Yeah, well, it's like we look at it first off as this kind of filter. It's like an EQ. Okay, so I got a 112 or a 212 because of this filter in this EQ. We don't tend to think of it as that the speaker becomes an integral part of the way the amplifier works, as far as that speaker is moving like a spring, and that spring puts off voltage, which feeds back. That feedback voltage is your presence knob. That feedback voltage is, you ever got a deep button on your amp? That's what it's adjusting, is how much of that you're going to let go back into your amplifier. So it moves, it goes backwards, and then again, that'll trigger reaction in power tubes, which triggers things like the filter caps, the power caps, to adjust the B plus voltage on the other tubes. So literally just taking that head and plugging it into a 112 cabinet, ignore the frequency response of the cabinet, the head itself changes to now be connected to that. And ignoring this sound when I plug it into the 412, it changes the head. They're integral to each other. So, we forget that, and and it's a huge portion of A, how the head sounds, and B, then there's what it goes through, which is that filter. We might go out and a good engineer might try a bunch of different microphones on a guitar cabinet in a bunch of different positions. That's a sound that they're just finding the best of. Changing the speaker cabinet is 100% different change, all over the place. So I'm a big fan of the different cabinets that you want to go through. When you're looking at different cab IRs and stuff like that, don't be so narrow on it, and really try and figure out how to get the best out of it. If you don't have a lot of different cabinets, like say you're just recording at home and you've got a decent microphone and a different amp, I've recently heard a bunch of recordings of the multi-tracks of a bunch of Queen stuff, which is fun, which is kind of why I knew what his tone was. But each track is different tonally, even though he's using the same amp, and it's because each, they may have done 6 layers of guitar, but one was with the microphone in front of the cabinet, one of them was on the other side of the room, and one of them it was it's all over the place in the room, placement in front of it for each different track, just to get like a different harmonic character. So because like if I used the same vocal mic for all my background vocals, and I did a ton, let's say I did 16 background vocals, and I used, let's say, something extreme like a 58, which you wouldn't necessarily use for recording that many vocal tracks, but eventually it would start to get a tone based on that. And same thing when you're trying to layer multiple guitar tracks, is that they'll start to get a tone or a character based on it. So moving your microphone is a great choice. Having something like a Waza TAE, where I can change the reactive load on the amp, or change the cabinet simulation or the mic simulation, and get different placement for different things, especially when I go to take a solo or put like a harmony over top something, or layer harmonies. Giving them each a slightly different sonic voice really helps out. And if you have something like, if you're doing something like what Doug was showing earlier, where he's getting all his sound inside of his DAW, with a plug-in type thing, think the same thing. Think of placing different tones in there. And and I'm also a big fan of printing a tone. So one of the things that I do, and a lot of other people do, I'm not set up this way right now, but there's an effect send and return on the Waza TAE. If I take the effect send into a second channel on my DAW, I can get a raw version of my amplifier, which is getting the effect of the reactive load, but it's got no effects or no cab sims or anything on it. And I can put that in my DAW, and I can use other plug-in devices to put different cab simulations on it for different tones. And then at the same time, I take the XLR out of it, and I feed that in and record that as a second track. So I capture the tone that I like. I played to that tone. I felt good about that tone when I played it down. I've got that on one track, and then I've got another one which I could then morph or change or run back through it or whatever to kind of find another voice if I want to do something after the fact, right? But I'm a big fan of at least printing something that I'd be happy with, right, in the first place.
Absolutely. Looks like we've got a superstar audio engineer in our midst. Just joined, Greg Worth, watching the stream.
Calling him out.
Hi, Greg.
So much for the anonymity. What's going on, Greg? How are you, man? So I'm going to take that opportunity. Let's see here. Let me try.
Well, we were talking about recording guitar, so
There you go.
We didn't plan that. It just happened.
It was
It's
perfect.
the universe. He heard us talking about miking up cabinets.
Well, it's perfect. Hi, Greg. Good to see you. Sorry we blew your any anonymity, but well, I guess that's what happens when you're famous. So, all right, hide and make inactive. So what I want to do is I want to take a moment and I want to talk about one of the places where we can go right and where we can go wrong. Because as long as we're talking about all this amplifier and miking stuff, there's this issue of phase. Phase is a thing, and I want to actually give people an opportunity to just kind of see this, and then because here's the thing is that I'm a big fan of stereo, but let's just say you've got one amp and another amp. Let's say Brian May has two AC30s. There is absolutely no guarantee that those two AC30s are in phase. So I want to give you a little bit of a visual example of what that can look like inside Pro Tools. So to do that, I'm going to do a screen share and I'm going to monitor my audio level, and hopefully it's not going to drop horrendously, and I'll be looking on output here, and well, it's going to be what it's going to be. So I'll yell if it looks like the level dropped. How about that? All right, so here we go. So testing 1 2. All right, so what we're looking at here is basically a pair of audio tracks. And if you take a look as these guys kind of rise and fall, they fall in sync. Now, if I were to kind of have them moving in the opposite fashion, let's see if I can audio suite that. I think, is there where is that? Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's I think it's audio suite under gain, I think. Yeah, you're trying to flip one of them, right?
I'm trying to flip that little sucker. There we go. Okay, audio suite, invert. There we go. And now all of a sudden, render. There we go. And now all of a sudden, those guys, where one's going down, the other's going up. And basically, those guys are going to cancel each other out. Now, here's the other thing you got to be aware of. I'm going to undo that. There is another type of phase alignment, and that is time alignment. Okay, so let's say, for example, as you were talking about in your example, Jeff, and I'm going to stop screen sharing here. You've got two different mics that are in two different locations. They're here. Imagine the sound's leaving your amp, cruising like this. One's capturing it on the up part of the wave right here, and the other's catching it on the down part of the wave there. You're going to have phase cancellation happening because of time misalignment.
Yes. So, and there's several types of effects that can happen from this, both positive and negative. So if you take the first example that you had, right, which is the most blatant, where you had two identical signals, but one is positive and one is negative. They're inverted from each other. That was a great example, because if you think of that, when the waveform was going up, it's telling your speaker to move outward. And when the waveform goes down, it tells your speaker to move inward. Well, if I have two identical signals and one told it to move out at the equal level that the other one told it to move in, then that speaker is going to do what? Sit still, right? So, and this is where the phase alignment comes out. If you did that, you will cancel out everything, right? So that's the most blatant form of phase. Any delay in a room does cause phase, though. So a reverb causes phase, a delay causes phase. In fact, a chorus is the exact same thing you just showed. A chorus is that you take two identical signals and you shift one of them, and then, what shifted 5 to 10 milliseconds, it moves back and forth. So you have one that's sitting still and then one's moving back and forth. A flanger is the same thing, except for it's just closer. So as it gets closer, the frequency moves higher and higher and higher, right? That's where you get that going up there. It'll get this notch frequency that goes inside of there. The EQ of your room is a function of phase and delay. In fact, in digital, we make an EQ is done by 4 delays typically. It's a thing called a biquad, is a typical filter that we use a lot of times in DSP, and it's 4 different delay times that equal a frequency boost or cut or whatever at a certain frequency. So you do have to watch out for phase, because when you're mixing, if your room is too small, you'll get phase, which you're hearing a frequency get canceled out. All right, so a delay will cause a frequency to get canceled out, and you don't know it. So you all of a sudden, yeah, because the was a 30 millisecond delay in your room, you just started canceling out something like 300 hertz, and you're like, what's going on, right? And you start boosting it more in your mix and more in your mix and more in your mix, and you're trying to compensate for something that can't get there. That's one of the things that when we first got on this call you were talking about, Doug, is putting room treatment in your room to try and kill some of those delays in your room so it doesn't cancel out stuff, because that's exactly what happens. So there's good ways to use phase cancellation: tape flangers, choruses, and then there's bad ways. If you do them 180 degrees out of phase, it's a problem. With microphones, there is a general rule which we call the 3-to-1 rule, right? Which is that if this microphone is 1 foot away from me, if I want to avoid any obvious tonal phase, the next microphone should be 3 times the distance after that. So the first microphone will be 1 foot away from me. The next microphone will be 4 feet away from me. And that will generally fix your things. So if you guys are having phase problems like recording drums in a small room, that's a really obvious place where it happens all the time. Putting room mics in a small room on a guitar amp, you might notice it as well. And, in cases like Brian May, you hear it intentionally a lot as part of his tone character. And with other people, they'd really try and get rid of it. Now, something to be aware of is your guitar creates all kinds of phase. And we love it. A pickup, a humbucker, is 2 coils. Well, there's phase between those 2 coils. The sound difference between these guys, the first front and back pickup, speaking backwards, right, from front and back pickup, it creates another comb filter based on phase and delay. So there's times we force it and it causes an EQ curve that we like, and there's times that it ruins things for us, so you got to be cautious of it. And especially in a room when you're trying to mix, that's a place that phase will really start to muck you up quickly, and can, even when you're trying to mic up things. But miking is a little bit more of a trick. If you're using 2 microphones on something, you'll get phase difference. I'm a big fan of running 2 amps at once. A lot of people don't realize is that in a guitar amp, every tube stage flips the phase. So, like if I had 2 amplifiers, like a Fender and a Marshall, typically they will be 180 degrees out of phase, because there's 1 extra gain stage in most Marshalls over most Twins and Deluxes. Right, so you'll instantly run into a comb filter if you put your head between. You're like what the what? It sounds really wide but weird when I'm right between the 2 things, and that's because they're out of phase. And then you go to like a gain stage, like a gain boost on your amp, and all of a sudden it'll fix itself because it turned on another tube stage, which flipped the state phase again, and now they're aligned. So it can be a challenge to, even in a live rig, if you're running 2 non-related amplifiers. Even 2 identical amplifiers. Like if I were to have 2 of the identical amp beside me, and I put one in one channel and one setting and one in another, I might actually have flipped the phase, and now they're kind of acting a little bit odd when I'm standing in between them. So phase is everywhere, and it can be your friend, and it can be your enemy. When you put it between 2 pickups, there's a lot of phase. That's your friend. But you stand between 2 speakers that are 180 degrees out of phase, and you feel like your head's kind of inverted itself somehow, right? So
I'm going to do another share here real quick, because this is one that I think many of us are going to encounter here. There was Richard had a question about noise and whatnot, and I actually have got a session pulled up here that I'm going to show you. All right, it's going to allow me to pull up the plugin as a separate window. Great. All right, I'll do that. So as it turns out, my upstairs studio, there's a resonant frequency in the room of A440. So literally, I basically hummed the frequency, went over the guitar, and like, oh, it's A440. So literally, what I did is I just found where that was, and I pulled it out. I think it'll play. Let's see what's going to happen here. Uh, yeah, I'm showing level. No, it's not passing
I
audio.
don't hear anything though.
Nope, it's not passing. All right.
Is this the one that you inverted the phase on one and
No,
canceled them out?
that was a different session. So
Okay.
this guy here, though, what's so neat about it is like it's literally right at A440. I pulled that sucker down, and that eliminated the majority of the problem. Now this other plugin here, let's see if this guy's gonna. Oh, that jumped me out of screen sharing mode. Hang on, let's try that again. Let's get you over into our other plugin here. Oh, hang on. Oh, stop that. Hang on. So this guy right here is kind of my secret sauce for making room noise go away. So this is a great plugin. It's W43, and if any of you ever have to deal with like some iPhone, somebody shot some video somewhere on their iPhone, and there's just a huge amount of ambient noise, this allows you to between the low, mid, and high to select first of all how tight the threshold is that you're actually just pulling the room audio out, and then which frequency you're choosing to pull out. So this kind of allowed me, there's just still a little bit of reverberation in that room that I generally don't like to hear room echo in my shotgun, because ideally when I hear shotgun, I want to hear the mic pretty close to me. So what's neat is I have a tendency to, I actually was a pretty chill on this one. I frequently in this W43, it's a Waves plugin, I have a tendency to actually run it a little bit hotter. And then if I pull something down here, I'll have a tendency to bring this up just a little bit, but there obviously must have been still something in the room going through there. And then but I will always try and find some other frequency to boost a little bit to compensate for what I've pulled out. But that W43, again, that ambient room reverberation is one of my least favorite sounds ever. Oh, one last little piece. Sorry, my bad. Let me get back over precision limiter. So this is a plugin that John Coonaberry invented, and it's based off of a ton of his gear when he had his mastering suite over at the plant. And basically, this is a bunch of bazillion-dollar gear all put into one and kind of what's that? Oh, okay. So, and I always said it, as I mentioned before, for -4 dB, so it can never get above -4 dB on output there. And for video, I'm always hyper conscious of not having things distort, but again, you want to have that nice level. So that's all I got to say about that, gentlemen.
Greg pointed out that there's this cool box for flipping phase when running multiple amps called the, I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, the Leal P-split. Somebody correct me if...
Layla?
Yeah.
L-E-H-L-E?
L-E-H-L-E, yeah, there you go. Layla.
Gerhard Layla, awesome.
There you go.
That's awesome. Yeah, because if you're trying to run multiple cabinets at the same time and you run into a phase problem, it can, it's hardware based, and it's a bit of an issue, right? And who wants to like solder the cable in reverse just to make it work? So having something solid like that is pretty cool, right? I haven't seen that box, but that's a great tip.
Yeah, I just looked it up on Sweetwater. It looks pretty cool, and it looks useful for reamping and all kinds of things. I think that's another topic that seems to be hot around a lot of guitar players these days. Right? How do I record my guitar amp, which we just talked about, and then how do I reamp after the fact? Anybody want to talk about that?
Well, and there's different ways of doing it. Like the way I was telling you earlier is that I do take and record the direct out, which is the cab sim from my Waza TAE, which is great. I take the and this is a more extreme version. I take the effects send out of it into a second channel. Now that second channel gives me the ability to then do different things. I can run it through a cab simulation in my Pro Tools rig or whatever, or I can run it back into the effects return on the amplifier and actually run it through the speaker cabinet again. Right, so that's a nice fun way because I could do different mic techniques, and that way I'm not playing while I'm trying to figure out my tone. I can figure out my mic placement based on already having recorded it. A lot of people they'll split their signal as they go into things, and you can use just about anything to split it. Like for example, you know, even if you have a Boss pedal with a stereo out and run one channel into channel one on your amplifier and the other side of it out to channel two on your DAW, that's a way of getting a dry signal and then passing it back out. There are better ways of doing that have good transform isolation and stuff like that, but as simple as that is getting a raw guitar into your DAW. But again, I like to hear what I'm doing at the same time. A lot of the plugins, like I noticed that both Doug and I have the Universal Audio plugins going on there, and using them, you can set it so that you can listen to it in real time as you're tracking, but you didn't track any of the effect to tape. So I can hear an amplifier while I'm tracking, but I didn't track it to tape, and that's a great way to do it, right? I've got two Apollos, and I plug right in the front end of those in the high impedance input, and I can go that way as well, right? Which is a great way of doing it.
There's one giant problem is you've saved the preset inside console. You can't recall the preset from inside Pro Tools.
Yes, you can save any particular single effect preset, right, in bottom left, right, but you can't save an effect stream, right. One of the cool things about the console is that I can put my tube screamer into my amplifier tone and throw a delay on it, like a RE201, and I can recall that as a tracking device, right. But if I turn the tracking off, so I'm only hearing it for monitor purposes, I can't pull up that same setup identically in Pro Tools. Yeah, that's a bit of a challenge.
I think that'll be a good reason to go to their new Luna DAW, as it incorporates console. It's basically, you don't need console anymore because it's all part of the DAW. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but I've been wanting to get a Universal Apollo for a long time, and console was one of the things that
Andrew, you just
kind of
got
deterred.
hot.
Oh, did I?
Or,
I haven't changed.
or Jeff's a little quiet.
Jeff's
I can be
been
louder.
a little quiet.
There we go. Okay, cool. No, I'm gonna pull
I can
this
pull
down
myself
just a little
down.
bit. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say that that's the biggest thing that I liked about the Apollos, besides them just sounding great, is their unison preamps. So it's actually models of mic preamps right there that you can track through. But I didn't like the idea of having the separate console application for many reasons, including what Doug just pointed out. But I'm really intrigued by that new Luna DAW.
Yeah, I'm pretty intrigued by it too, because it's not only console tone, like the Neve console that you can turn on as a plugin, but the actual signal flow that goes underneath it, which is really cool. You can also turn on tape function, which is really cool. So kind of excited for. I did turn it on for a little while on this computer, but as I said, my old computer is old, so we're not plugged in just yet there. And also learning a new DAW is always a quick challenge, which when you're comfortable with something, it's a little bit of a change.
Yeah.
But one of the things I also like to do, which is a little bit weird, as far as a lot of the ways modern people record, but a little more traditional, and that is that when I am recording, I told you I like to get my tone before I actually hit tape virtually. I will actually take the direct outs of whatever device I'm using, like say I'm using a GT1000 or the outputs of my Waza TA, and I'm plugging them into two 1073s. And the common thing in a recording studio when I was growing up was you go into your mic pre, you push your mic pre 10 dB into clipping and bring down the output fader, so you get that extra a class A distortion on top of it. And I'll do that when I'm tracking a lot, and that's a whole other thing, because I'll push it into those transformers and stuff like that, which is really a lot of character and a lot of fun. And that's one of those things you can only do externally. If you're going to try and get the weight of those transformers on there, and I'm a big fan of that as well. So, I'm also a big fan of doing combinations of using the direct out on the device, and then using like a room mic as well. You do have to be cautious when you're using any device where you're trying to mic up the speaker and also take a DI off it. It doesn't matter who it's by. There's a good chance that they're going to be a little bit out of line and have the phase problems that Doug was talking about a little bit earlier. So play with your phase switch. Make sure that your phase switch is fun, and also even if it is out of phase but you like the tone, that's okay too, right? But just know that you're doing it intentionally as opposed to accidentally. It's like the common thing of using a 421 and an SM57, from years ago. That was the thing that everybody did. There's all kinds of phase between those unless you get them exactly perfect, and it's part of the character that goes on there. And but like Doug was saying earlier, he hears a tone in his room. Any echo in a room has a length. That length will cause a delay. That delay will start to cancel itself out. So all of a sudden you can't hear 440 hertz in Doug's case, or you hear too much of it. Is the more common problem. So you got to understand what you're dealing with, and then deal with it and get rid of it. Right. So check things. Walk around the room a lot, especially if you're mixing. I really encourage walking around the room. Also, play noise. Everybody always tries to make a silent room. I do my best mixes if I have a small fan in the room, because if it falls into a point where it's in the noise of the fan, guess what? It's not being heard in the mix, right? It's a really easy way to kind of know where you're going. So, when you're setting up your presets, the biggest problem with setting up presets is, of course, there's a thing called Fletcher-Munson curve, which is that our frequency response changes based on volume. So be cautious of that as well. When things are quiet, we only hear mid frequencies very, very clearly. Bass and treble goes away. When things are really loud, the bass and treble becomes equal to those mid frequencies. So you got to be cautious with those. Waza TA has a choice on it. So through the live speaker cabinet, it will automatically do that. It'll automatically do a Fletcher-Munson curve, difference curve. So as I turn the volume down, it adds bass and treble to compensate for what I'm listening to. So I can write my presets at super quiet, bedroom volume, and then go to play with the drummer, and they actually work, which is another cool fun thing. So
Genius. The other thing, I've been spending a lot of time with this crazy track, the Crying Machine, playing over this, working on mode changes, switching between minor, Phrygian, and harmonic minor. It's one thing to switch between two modes, but by the time you throw in a third mode, it is great harmonic and mental and tactile practice to switch between three different changes. But one of the things that I was reminded of as I was going between different amp models was that when you have to start turning something up, it's the wrong sound. Like to get it to sit in the mix, if you have to keep turning it up and turning it up, it's either the wrong amp or you've got to do some EQ adjustment. And it was interesting. There's a conversation we've been having. It's an ongoing thread here. Is like mid range is where a lot of the sweet tone comes in, but in terms of pick attack, as soon as you get the mid range up above a certain level, all the noise of the pick, just like it's where all the fumble of the pick comes through. So it's a funny thing. Is like at a certain rate, the mid range can only get so loud for me, or at least on some of the amps that I'm using, before I just have to pull it down. And it's an interesting thing for long notes. I can get away with it, but on the faster notes, just like the mid range really kind of gets there. But again, the thing that I discovered, I just happened to pull up a different amp model. I was like, oh, that. And again, that thing, just the point being is if you find that you're like, I just need to keep turning that up compared to another sound you had, probably means that the sound that you're going for in the track with that amp is not going to be ultimately yield the best results because it's fighting with other stuff.
Right. And if you guys when you're mixing, one of the things that I really like doing as an education thing, if you have anything that can read frequency response, like I use a plugin called Blue Cat Audio, which will do a frequency response online. If you go to YouTube, you can type in Jimmy Page, Whole Lotta Love, isolated track, and you can find the isolated guitar track from that, or whatever. There's a bunch of isolated guitar tracks out there that you can hear, or bass tracks, or whatever. I like to plug them in and look at the frequency response, right? And you can capture the frequency response, then you play the same part, and you can see how your frequency response sits next to it. It's a great way to kind of see how are my ears sitting versus something that already knows sits in a track extremely well, right? Obviously, the gain is different, the harmonics are different, but am I in the right footprint? Am I in the right character and vibe? It's a great learning tool to realize which, how much too much bass is, because we tended to too much bass in most recordings, for guitar players, you know, and how much is too much high end, right? Because more is always more. It's like candy. Yeah, right? You keep having more, right? And I've seen many people go, oh, give a little more high end, 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 and all of a sudden it's just shrill and taking out your fillings, right? So and just having like a footprint. So that's a great plugin. It's by Blue Cat Audio, and you just and then just sit down for a little bit and download some of these isolated tracks. Download, if you're doing a mix, pull up Freddie Mercury, go isolated, Bohemian Rhapsody. You can probably find it, but and start looking for some of these isolated tracks. Realize that once they hit about 10,000 hertz, they start to screw up because the MP3 process that's on the right isn't right. So don't use them as purity things, but just as kind of like, all right, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Sit there and get your dialed in guitar tone and go, okay, I was really going for that Zach Wild tone. Type in, Zach Wild and see if you can find an isolated track for it, or find, that 2-second part in the middle of a song, and then look at your frequency response versus their frequency response. It can really help you to understand what you're doing right compared to your peers. It's, and what you want to be trying to accomplish. And you'll be pretty surprised. Way too many of us are so scooped, right? And it is mids that we need. But as Doug said, especially fast players like Doug, somebody who can really shred and play, they do want to hear that high-end articulation, because that's their identification of their pick attack. So there is a good balance of it where you can have it clear and mighty, but without being shrill.
Absolutely, yeah.
I put on flying in a Blue Dream today as I was kind of doing my little track walk, and I was surprised that there's presence in the high end, but it's not a super bright guitar sound. It's a lovely sounding record. So it's a fascinating thing. I actually one of the interesting things that happened, and it was so strange. So Joe called me one day and said, "Hey, I'm in the recording studio. You want to come hang out?" And I was like, "Yeah." But I don't know about you guys, but I don't like having anybody extraneous in this situation. And then he kind of was like, "Hey, you want to come back tomorrow?" And it was so interesting to watch him work. And there were, I'll find the amps. There were a ton of amps. So the thing is, we think about, oh, Joe's got his tone, like he was using all sorts of different amps. I'll find that photo. But Andrew, how many guitars do you have? And I mean, the door's closed, so Saw can't hear you. But how much time do you
Hey,
spend?
this is being recorded. She can go back and do that. Let's just say that I lost count.
Okay.
After 50.
After 50, you have. Some people would say you have a problem. Jeff, how many 412 cabinets do you have now?
Right now I think I have 18 or 20.
And are they still in the garage, or where are they?
Most of them right now are at the garage right now. But I've some over at my rehearsal studio, some at another place I go and play, and 2 here in my apartment. So yeah, I've got a lot of 412s. Lots of them.
Your guys 412s and guitars should get together and
Yeah,
make
my
combos or
412s
something.
don't get as much playtime these days. Most of them. There's some in the room behind me, but most of them are in my storage shed. It's just it's one of those things. It's like you feel bad for not using them, but you don't want to give them up because they're like your babies.
Well, and for the 412s, that's definitely a place where I'm at. Is I started getting it's always just stereo pairs is where I started. It's like, oh, I need 2 vintage 30, I need 2 greenback 25, I need 2 classic lead 80s, I ended up with twos, 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 and twos. You know, as I kept going. You know, and uh, but trying to get rid of them, if I didn't, you know, you can't sell 412s to save your life, right? Which is one of the flaws of that assessment. You have guitars which probably have value, right?
Yeah,
Which is
those
the big
those I could
difference.
sell.
That-
But I'm with you on the 412s. I've got basically pairs of them again because I like stereo or I wanted a backup or what have you. And
Yeah, well, it's like, and again, the big thing with the way that artists are dealing with. I mean, we're kind of in this world as guitar players where we're either too loud or not loud enough, right? It's like I'm at
What?
home, I want my amp. Yes, we're either too loud or not loud enough. It's like, and there's no comfortable zone. It's like if I'm, you know, if you're a big tour artist or even, you know, most mediocre, you know, size artists now are doing, you know, in-ear monitors, so they don't want any stage volume. So you can show up with a you know, an all-in-one modeler, you know, something like you know, a GT1000 is a great example of that. You know, a Helix or something like that, and go in-ear. But then you go to rehearsal. What are you going to play through, right? You need some type of monitoring system that's loud enough to get over the drummer. And, you know, and then you go home and you want to write your presets and you want to play through your live rig, but now you're not in-ear or through the PA system or through the loud cabinet, right? And you wrote it at low volumes, you know, so it's a challenge as a guitar player to live in an environment where we want the feel and tone and everything of our amp cranked up, and nobody wants us to be cranked up, right? Everybody thinks we're just megalomaniacs and want to be too loud, but really we just want to be loud enough that our amp feels right. And you know, so you know, the more and more solutions that have come out, you know, for me, the Waza tube amp expander really, you know, sits nicely because you can take any amp you already currently own and do that. But it's a funny world, you know, and trying to get something that fits in all scenarios, you know, is difficult for everybody. You know, whether, you know, they're playing their local church and they need to be quiet because nobody wants them to come in blaring with a, you know, 100-watt head. That's not going to go over very well.
Aw,
I know.
open
right?
the heavens. Come on, wake people up.
Exactly.
It's Sunday morning.
It's the way it should be done, right? You know, and as I said, like there are several reasonably sized rehearsal studios that I've been, you know, my band practiced at in the LA area, and they all have signs on the wall: "Do not plug your modeler into our PA, right? You will be kicked out." Right? And you know, so now you bought a modeler so you can have something that's an all-in-one solution. You can just show up to the gig, except for now for rehearsal, you have to have something else to play through, right? And you know, that's a big challenge, right? And so we're in a fun world, but at the same time, we have all the options in the world to us now that our predecessors just did not. They did not have all the advantages we have.
it's a great time to be a guitar player or any musician for that matter.
Hey guys, I'm gonna share some photos here, real quick.
Never too many guitar amps. You're right, Vince.
All right, there we go. Now, what's funny about this photo? There's a little role reversal, and I think it's just like a photo snap. That's Kunaberty, you know, twiddling the knob on one of the original reamps. But take a look who's back by the console.
Yeah, I see Joe back there.
It's just so
I
much. Joe's
recognize
like,
that head.
what exactly are you guys doing out there? But look at all those things that are mic'd up out there, and it's like it's all ready to go. And look at all the different cabinets, right? Like there's a nice '60s cabinet there, and then all the different amps.
Yeah, a wide panel deluxe, a narrow panel deluxe. So it's a 5E3 and a 5B3, right? That's so cool, right? So many wide panels, you know, tweeds.
There we go. So, and you know, and they were all, you know, all ready to go. So aren't they lovely?
Yeah.
They are so lovely, right? Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've been finding a lot of fun with is you know, is wirelesses, because you know, there's so many things you can connect to now easily by having these virtual cables, right? I did a session several months ago, and I was expecting to record a drummer, and the drummer brought a backing track, and the drummer brought the rest of the band who decided to play, you know, with modelers and things like that, and just having some like quick wirelesses to plug in, no ground loops, no hiss, no fuss, no muss. That really works out great. but it really helps to when you're trying to go through, like from my Apollo into my amp, right? I'm not getting ground loops from the other side of the room. I'm not getting any of the issues that you would run into. Trying to, the impedance isn't an issue. The ground lift isn't an issue. I'm not getting some weird ticky hum. That my amp happens to be in the other room and it's picking up something. Wirelesses have saved me on noise issues. Just using, it's like these. The Boss WL20's been great.
Oh yeah, I'm with you. I can't not play without a wireless anymore. I have some guitar cables on the hook right back there that hardly ever get used, and it's great to stand up from your chair in the studio and not get yanked.
Look at that.
And that's a
Hey,
Boss
I recognize
cable,
that
too.
cable. That's a Boss cable.
That's a, those. So the funny thing is that you guys were, I don't know if you were giving them out at one of the Satriani or the Vi camps, but I remember it was like, oh great, just what we need, another cable manufacturer, and then I took them home. I was like, these cables are awesome.
They're extremely good, right?
They
Yeah.
Not only sonically, but they have a lifetime warranty on them, and I think I will go to trade shows and I'll pull out a box of them and I won't have anything in my hand. You know how they have the zip ties on them? I'll just sit there and twist them until the zip tie pops off, and I've never broken one. And everybody's like, ah, right? It's like no, it's fine, right? I don't advise that. That's I got to get up and running quick, and it's already 2 a.m. But right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, it's approaching 9:00.
So we're just getting started.
We're just getting started. But Jeff, you picked up the guitar there. Do you have any parting riffs for us? Lovely.
There you go.
Love it.
Love it, love it, love it,
Take
love
it to 11.
That's awesome.
And you can take it to 11 in silence with the tube amp expander.
That's awesome.
Yes, I was living in Simi Valley, California. Had a decent sized house, but the drive to get to Roland was killing me because it was taking me like an hour and a half every day. So I moved to a tiny little apartment that's in Glendale, right up not very far from the Roland corporate office, and it's been quite nice to be there, but there's no way I could do any kind of volume here, and it's not been an issue at all. Nobody even probably knows that I play guitar too much, right? Except for my acoustic stuff, right? So,
Nice. I think if I had one of those, I might use my tube amps more often. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
a nudge, nudge. I
just
think I
playing.
know a guy. Is that what I'm hearing?
I know a few guys.
Okay, we'll have to work. Talk afterwards.
It's all good. No, that thing is super cool, and it's like, I think every time you guys talk about it or Doug shows it off, like, I find some new use or new thing that it does. So this has been educational for me as well as the viewers.
That's been great. There's a last question about that came in. How much do you record in stereo with 2 amps, or do you do that all in the DAW? I'm going to take the bait on that if you guys are good. At 8:59. So I'm a huge fan of whether it's in the box or whether it's not, of recording in stereo, and whether that's using dual amp models or 1 amp model with 2 different cabinets. And it's basically anything that I can do to separate the guitars left and right. I'm going to try and do that, especially if I'm working with a vocalist, because it allows you to create the sweet spot where the vocals go front and center and then the guitars on either side. The other thing I love to do is bring the guitars in. People are probably sick of me saying it, but delays and reverbs on the far outside. Bring the guitars or the cabinets. That is to say, the direct sound in about 20%. And what's neat is it creates this 3D kind of flume, if you will, because the delays and the reverb are actually behind the direct signal and the time. So what it is, you actually hear this three-dimensional space of the guitars. It's really cool. So I like to do that with delays, amps, reverbs, so stereo, pretty much every chance I get. The interesting thing is that there are phase issues, so you do have to be conscious of that. But one of the other interesting things is so long as you're aware that if somebody collapses it to mono, there are times that you actually will purposely use things out of phase and pan them hard left and hard right because they go extra wide, and it can be really cool. So any thoughts on stereoisms before we jet out of here, gentlemen?
Well, first off, like a lot of the old classic albums that we like, there was a lot of stereo spread based on the fact that like bass would be leaning one side and guitar would be leaning the other, right? The other day I was trying to figure out something from a Whole Lot of Love. Remember, I told you I've been like looking for isolated tracks, and you can clearly hear that what he's actually doing is on one channel. He's got a tape echo that's feeding 100% into a plate, and he's got 171 millisecond delay on that, so that right, it's guitar on one side and reverb on the other. It's a great way to get some width. But
so wait. So hang on. So he's using the Echoplex for pre-delay.
He's got 171 millisecond pre-delay, but it's done with an Echoplex, right? So awesome fun. Yeah, if you put on the isolated tracks, you'd be amazed. Like
hang on. I'll be back. So hang on.
He's going somewhere. Well, I'll continue those words. If you pull down the isolated tracks of that, there's one track where he's just literally holding the trem bar down, feeding back in the room, just going. Oh, Doug's got to do it. He went to get his actual tape echo, right? Okay. And you guys know what a tape echo fan.
All right.
The weird thing, Doug, is I actually don't own a tape echo. I've done so many models of tape echoes for different manufacturers, and I don't actually own a tape echo. All right, we got to fix that. Right?
I missed all that, unfortunately. So,
we were saying the most glowing things about you, Don.
Oh. Like Andrew was saying, I can watch the stream back. So, of course, here we go. Oh.
Yes. So he's got about 171 millisecond pre-delay feeding the plate. So if you set that up, went through that guy, 100% wet, put that on one side, raw guitar track on the other side, and there you go. You would have that sound, plexi. That whole thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. Like, even right now, as I'm playing out the Waza TAE, it's got all the effects, like the reverb and delay. They're stereo, and I'm tracking it stereo. And right now, you guys are hearing those effects in stereo, even though the core guitar sound right down the middle. Big fan of that.
Love it.
Yeah, I think you need more wahs.
Well,
by the way.
and of course you of course. So for all the folks that don't know, because I know these guys do, and that is to say Andrew and Jeff. So this is the original Vox Wah. This is I don't mean like the first one, but this is one of the early ones. What's crazy about it, it's got a flipping sticker on the side. So it's like, there you go, you can see it. It's a sticker.
That's so funny.
So this was the case from, I think, the volume pedal for the organ. And as a matter of fact, there you go. So there's the plug for where that would have gone, because I know that's on a power supply. So it's just it's just so funny. I've actually got one of those one of the volume pedals that's actually got hardwired cables coming out of the side of it. But
oh wow.
Yeah, Andrew, I have as many wah-wahs as you have guitars, so there.
I believe it, without a doubt.
But it's so funny the fixation on Page, right? I mean, for good reason. He just really there was a period of time on as I was on the treadmill, I was on a huge Jimmy Page kick because the tone and where he sits in the time and just again that whole concept is just like they aren't necessarily the biggest guitar tones in the world. What you got?
Well, I'm gonna see if I can emulate what I just told you, right?
So you're gonna pull up an EMT 140?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna first pull up a delay, right, which I'm looking for. Where's it at in my plugins here?
While Jeff's
EP.
doing that, I'm gonna get a surprise.
All right, can I do this in real time? Let's see. This guy at 171 milliseconds. I think I can handle if I'm 4 milliseconds off. All right, and let's put a ET. See, where's reverb? Of course, when I'm reading in front of people, I feel stupid. Okay.
Oh, look at this,
140.
Andrew.
All right, and let's set this guy 100% wet. So if I'm not mistaken, it's probably too long right now in delay time. So let's bring it back down. And
Zeppelin's like my favorite band, so
Oh,
so
awesome.
let's
Look
see
at
what
this.
happens if I do that right.
gotta have it.
No, that's way too loud, obviously.
This needs a whole lot of love.
Why is it not going down?
Aw.
Volume? Oh, hang on. Okay, I gotta adjust my volume for you guys. There you go. See, I'm hearing through the Q sense. I need to make sure. All right. Bring the reverb time down a little bit. We're wasting everybody's time.
Can you bring the verb up? It's a little quiet here.
Okay. Yeah, I can't hear exactly what you guys are hearing.
Yeah,
so
bring it all up.
Is that okay?
Oh, Jeff,
Yeah.
do you are you running the direct sound through those two inputs that I'm seeing there, like 7 and 8?
So yep.
Can you pan them to the left?
All the way to the left.
Yeah. And can you get the reverb to come up on the right?
Turn off my microphone so you don't hear my. Need a wall for that. So fun,
Awesome.
but you can definitely hear the pre-delay. The 171 milliseconds is definitely right. Which I just put it in Pro Tools and measured it because you can clearly read it. Yeah, pretty easy to do.
I'm making a note of that. Whole lot of sling luff. All right. First of all,
Always too much sling off. That's the biggest problem.
no. Just want to say thank you to everybody that hung out with us. Really appreciate it. And Andrew, thank you,
Thanks
my man.
so much, everybody.
Jeff, you look very
Thank you so much
consular.
for having me. Oh, yeah, that's right. Let me go back to human Jeff instead of console Jeff. Right.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for hanging out. Really, always a pleasure. Really, it's kind of like Vi Academy, or Petrucci, or G4, but
Except for we're shutting down about 4 hours earlier than we would have there.
that is true. And then we won't be getting. Well, actually, I get up pretty early. But the point being is,
Nice 12 double neck.
yeah, isn't that sweet?
Oh, thanks. This one, like I mentioned earlier, needs a whole lot of love. It's going on the bench soon. It's spent more time than I would like hanging on the wall in the hallway. But I've speaking of interesting things. Sorry, real one note about Jimmy Page. That the reason I brought this up, I found that there were certain sounds I couldn't get unless you physically have this and leave one like both necks on, and you're playing, let's say the 6 string neck, and the 12 string just gives some sympathetic resonance.
Yeah.
Like, once I actually got my hands on one of these, I was like, oh my god, that's the sound. That's why I could never get it.
So in other words,
So-
like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, go
No,
ahead.
no,
That's great.
it's sort of like playing on an acoustic and you're only playing on the E and B string, but you can hear the harmonics of the other 4 strings ringing.
Exactly.
Same thing happens with those. They're like drone strings on a sitar kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So you leave the 12 string on at a light volume and you play, and it's kind of whatever harmonics are you're hitting that it can accent on those strings. They come alive. I've seen people do that in studio as well, is where they'll take and put several acoustic guitars in a room and record a part, and that way each of the acoustics will start becoming string reverbs, right? Right. So it's a cool trick.
Gentlemen,
This has been great.
yes, thank you so much. All right,
so much fun.
everybody
Thanks
that's
for
hung
inviting
out,
me
thanks
on.
again. Have a great night, and cheers.